We're going to record this live on the YouTube as well.
Yes, sir. Please start.
Good evening to all. President of the Association, CA Munish Shah, Secretary Rushabh Shah, Chairman of Indirect Tax Committee Hem Chajed. We also welcome Porbandar CP Study Circle member, faculty of the day, Sri Yes Daga, and dear fellow participants. I welcome you all in the second lecture of GST series. Today's topic on departmental assessment and audit is very important from the GST's practitioner's point of view. Those we are practicing in the routine day-to-day return filing and assessment, for us it is very important. If we think that out of the total litigations, more than 90% litigations pertaining to the assessment, whether it is for the classifications or whether it be high pitch additions or a denial of input tax credit. So, as you all are aware that Section 65 of the GST Act, read with Rule 101, deals with the audit assessment and give powers to the officers. Friends, CGST department has come out with GST audit manual in 2019. Also, the faceless assessment guide in 2020 has also been issued. And I am of the opinion that CGST department approach is more focused than the state GST department, as they are having a separate wing and dedicated team for the audit. Yes, in Gujarat, for a state department, we don't have the dedicated team for this audit. But the general ward officer in charge conduct the assessment proceedings also. So compared to the CGST department, this SGST department is not that much focus also. Those who are coming from the VAT background like me are not habituated by the visit of the officers at the client place for conducting of the audit previously under the service tax and now under the GST audit or assessment. Moreover, once the audit start, there is an internal guideline for completion of the audit within a specific time as far as the CGST department is concerned. Generally, we believe that this audit will conduct for a year, or we can say for the assessment year. But it is not the case. They can conduct the audit for more than 1 year together, of course, after issuing the appropriate notice. But yes, it is possible that once you are receiving the notice, they can conduct the audit for 17, 18, 18, 19, and 19, 20. Also, all the 3 years they can start to complete together. And I am very happy that for such an important topic, we have Yash Dedda from Jaipur as a faculty. Yash is a good friend of mine and is a good host also, as we have enjoyed his hospitality in Jaipur when we were there for the CTC RRC in January 2019. Yes, I still remember our morning breakfast at the Tapri. Without taking much of your time, I request Chandresh Madlani, convener of the Porbandar CP Study Circle, for formal introduction of Yash Dedda.
Thank you, sir, for giving me opportunity to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. CAS Dadaji. Yes, Dadaji is a fellow member of the ICAI. He is associated with Messrs. Dada and Company as a partner. He is having working experience of over 11 years in the field of IDT with concentration only on GST, service tax and excise matter. He is currently engaged in handling litigation along with advising clients, structuring transactions, and conducting due diligence in given fields of taxation. He was a special invitee to the IDT committee of ICAI for the term 1819 and 1920. He is also on panel of Rajasthan as a GST, Service Tax and Excise Advisor for industry members. He has represented ICAI in Regional Advisory Committee, Rajasthan, under aegis of Chief Commissioner of Excise and Custom, Jaipur. He was written handbook on principle of classification for goods and services under GST and also on casual taxable person for IDTC of ICAI. He has also actively contributed as a core member of the team which has drafted technical guide on GST audit issued by ICAI. He is delivered lecture in northern, western and eastern parts of India and is also regular attendee of various study course on GST conducted by BCS, CTC, ICAI and other forums as group of leader and coordinator. He is an empanel trainer of GST on for ICI and Regional Training Institute for Revenue and C&AG officers, Rajasthan as GST officer. As his passion, he is also engaged in grooming young professional of CS, CS and MBA on topic of soft skill and professional life management. Let us welcome our guest speaker, CES Dadaji. Please give kind attention and help me out to welcome the yes Dadaji for today's discussion on department assessment, audit and limitation period. Please, sir, continue.
Thank you so much, sir. Okay. At the outset, first of all, I would like to thank Chartered Accountants Association Ahmedabad for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this very interesting course named as Litigation Basics. Dear Monish Bhai, President of the Association, dear Priyam Bhai, Haim, MOC, and all other members. Thank you so much for the wonderful words of appreciation, and thank you so much for this warm welcome. And I remember when Priyam Bhai, Haim, and all other members, majority of you who came to Jaipur for CTC RRC, it was not planned. How are we going to spend our early morning when I had gone to pick them up at the airport? But it was such a wonderful time we had together at a cafe called Tapri, and I still remember have those fond memories. And I welcome all of you from Ahmedabad to come to Jaipur, so that we can have that sharing again, beating aside all this COVID pandemic and all its woes around it. I remember that some 2-3 months back, Monish Bhai called me and he said that you're planning a RRC, and that's one of the regular affairs of this association, and you're planning an RRC at Mount Abu. And he said that will I be comfortable taking a session there, and I happily accepted it. But then unfortunately the second wave of COVID came in. Because of this, I understand that the program could not happen, and he said but still he would like to have one of the sessions in any of the programs which are going to be there. So I'm happy that I'm here, and he invited me for this particular session. Now, friends, as Priyam Bhai said, and I totally agree with whatever he said in his initial remarks regarding the audit and assessment. And in fact, he made a very interesting point in the starting by saying that all those who come from a VAT background, you're not comfortable from the audit aspect, to which central excise and service tax people are quite equipped with, or they have experienced that in the earlier regime. And I am one of those people who do not have any VAT experience. So when I don't have any VAT experience, probably assessment as a concept is something which is new for me. And I understand that assessment as a concept for all those who are coming from the VAT background, you have seen that day in and day out. You have dealt with the officers. In fact, state officers know how to conduct the assessment, but obviously they do not have prior experience of doing an audit. Whereas at the CGST side of it, they have a lot of experience in terms of how to do an audit of a particular SSC. But when once you'll ask them that what are the provisions of assessment, how do you do an assessment, probably they would be blank or they would not have an idea. Now, interestingly, when we come to the GST law, we realize that both these provisions are there in the law. Both these provisions are quite detailed. The procedure in respect of these these provisions have been detailed, have been laid down quite properly. And hence it becomes very interesting for people like me or people like Priyam Bhai, who come from different backgrounds, but we are converging together and coming in GST to see what are those things which you are bringing from the VAT perspective, and what are those things which I am bringing from the service tax or excise perspective, and how it is going to help us when we would handle all this assessment and audits. But before I start, I always say that whenever in my presentation, in the first slide, what you see as loading, that loading is not a technical problem of my website, but that is something which is currently the state of GST, which is there in India. That is still, it is at the loading stage, or it is at the stage which is not yet settled. And because the law is not settled, interestingly, it throws up a lot of those things in front of you of which you are not aware of, or probably of which you would not have a proper answer coming from the law. And then again, your professional expertise comes into a role, your professional wisdom comes in, and some sort of professional judgment you have to take where the provisions are yet not fully developed, or you realize they are not sacrosanct with the particular situation we are into. So in this background, when we come to the specifics of the issue which we have in hand today, before I go to that, and one thing again which I generally share with all my friends wherever I have been given an opportunity to share my views, that in last 1 year we have seen a complete change in the approach in which we do things. And that change in approach has not only been in the manner in which you and me are communicating today, but the change in approach has been in all other aspects, specifically when you look at the professional side of your life. That is to say, I think before this pandemic, none of us thought that we are going to invest our time and energy in technology to that extent, the way we have been doing in last 1 year. In fact, Zoom as a word, none of us was aware of, at least I was not aware of before this pandemic. And now I think on daily basis, the Zoom as a platform we have been using, and we have been using quite wonderfully, maybe twice or thrice in a day. Having said that, when we realize, we see that things in our life, they do not remain same. They keep on changing, and life is very uncertain, and at least situations around us are very uncertain. When you put that in perspective of a professional life, you take all these three things, be it COVID, be it technology, or be it GST. All three have been in a manner very uncertain, changing, and the changes which they are bringing in, our reaction time, basically it gets on decreasing. Maybe in terms of adapting to the technology, we had a little more breathing time to adapt to it. In terms of GST, the way things keep on changing, that reaction time has reduced. And in terms of COVID, in fact, the reaction time is even more less. And in this background, probably one thing which all of us we have realized is that expert is not a person who can solve the problem, but expert is also a person who can basically see what is coming through in next some time, and how do you envisage that, and can you actually prepare yourself for it to the best of your capabilities. And that is why when I see in this background, this topic, that is assessments, audit and limitation, that is one of the the name of your course is Litigation Basics. And today we are discussing that B you have done yesterday, I think with Puneet ji. And today when we are talking about A, that is assessment, audit and limitation. One thing to understand is that those provisions which are there in the law, they are to some extent are only the mechanism in which what proper officer or what government officer basically wants to do. But beyond that, the dynamics with which he is going to work, the manner in which he is going to issue a notice, the manner in which he is going to look at books of account, they are going to keep on changing regularly. And I'm saying that it is going to keep on changing regularly is because the way we are updating ourselves, the way we are educating ourselves, their education, their manner of updating and their training, it has also increased multifold. So the way we are basically improving all our arms and ammunitions to give a reply to that, they are also trying to hone their skills in a manner to say that they would like to come sharper and stronger to us. And that is why all of this becomes very interesting. Before we go to the specifics of the topic, one point which I want all of us to basically focus upon and then going to the topic is that whenever we talk about any taxation laws and whenever we talk about the basic foundation of the taxation law on which we are standing, we have this 1999 judgment given by the Honorable Supreme Court in case of Mathuram Agarwal versus State of Madhya Pradesh. This judgment was in the context of municipal taxes. The issue was regarding levy of a municipal tax in a specific period of time, and the manner in which that municipal tax was to be levied. There was confusion as to at what point of time that tax would be paid. The petitioner actually went up to the Supreme Court and they said that the levy provisions which are given for the municipal taxes, they are not clear, they're ambiguous, and that is why levy should fail. In that background, Supreme Court delivered a very precise judgment. And in this, they said three things are very important whenever you're looking at a levy. First thing is the subject matter of the tax. Second is the person who is liable to pay tax. And third is the rate at which the tax needs to be paid. And the Supreme Court said that any of these three things, if they're unclear, if in case there is ambiguity in any of these three, then levy is going to fail. Now, in terms of GST, all of us are pretty clear that levy provisions are quite clear, quite absolute. And that is why wherever there is any confusion, generally would say that probably this is outside the levy, or any of those things which are given in Section 9 or in Section 7 of the CGST Act, that is the levy provision or the scope of supply. We understand that they have to be static, they have to be constant, and they should not be dynamic with terms of the changing transactions. But having said that, having understood that, the measure of all this levy, in a sense, how am I going to identify what is the quantum which is coming out on the basis of reading the levy provisions? And after measurement done by me, how is the officer going to measure it? And after the measurement done by the officer, how he is going to communicate to me? That is basically called, in a nutshell, we call it as an adjudication procedure, where the measure of it and the final conclusion of it, there is a specific procedure which needs to be followed by the proper officer, in which we also have a right to reply, we also have a right to represent, and then on the basis of the provisions of the law, final outcome comes in, where further, if in case required, we go to the second stage, which is called as litigation. Today, we will restrict ourselves to everything before that. In fact, we will not go to the show cause notice also, but we will stick ourselves to this chart. Now, what you see in this chart is very interesting. And what you see here, the right-hand side of it is basically show cause notice. Generally, of which we talk about that show cause notice के अंदर हम generally कहते हैं कि उन्होंने ये बोला है कि हमने tax pay नहीं करा जानबूझकर, and for that is why they are asking us to pay tax, interest and penalty, and they are saying that it is a case of suppression or misrepresentation of facts. And for that we say generally 74 के अंदर एक show cause notice issue हुआ है. But friends, before we go to that, it is very important, and as what Priyambai said, that a regular practitioner who is into compliance, filing of returns, he is that first person who has the first brush with any of the notices which is issued by the department. And in the GST law, the manner in which officer is going to communicate with the assessee, it has been given in 3 separate chapters. And all of these 3 chapters, they have their own flavor, they have their own scope, they have their own limitation, and they also have their own procedures. And all of them are mutually exclusive. And that is why it becomes very important for us to understand that before looking at the show cause notice, we should also know that officer has taken the what route, from which route he is coming to the issuance of a show cause notice. Is he coming through the route of assessment that is given under section 59 to section 64, that is chapter 12? Or is he coming through the route of audit, that is chapter 13, section 65 and 66? Or is he coming through the route of investigation or inspection, that is from section 67 to 72, that is search and seizures and all those things? Now, in all of these 3 routes, they have their own forms, they have their own modalities. In fact, to some extent, they have a limited criteria within which officer can basically do his duties. And for all of this, as an assessee, we have certain rights which we can basically exercise depending upon at what stage we are. Okay, so why it is important to understand? Because all of us know that whatever tax has been charged from us, or whatever tax we are required to pay under GST, that comes from the mother, that is the Constitution of India, Article 265. And Article 265 says that no tax shall be levied or collected except the authority of law. Now, what is the authority of law? That has also been explained by Supreme Court in one of the judgments in case of Municipal Council versus Kamal Kumar, where the Supreme Court said that whenever you talk about the authority of law under Section 2, Article 265, it does not only mean the levy provisions and the measure through which it would be collected and all those things, but in fact, the procedures are also very important. And any tax which has been collected in violation of the procedures which are given in the law, then that is not in accordance with the Article 265 of the Constitution of India. And hence, that is why it becomes even more important for us to understand that the procedure which has been given under the GST laws, that is assessment, audit, and inspection, the officer has taken the correct route, the power of which was given to him, it was within his jurisdiction. Within his jurisdiction, he has applied all the procedures which were there. And if in case you are able to pinpoint that he has not done certain things which are given in the section, that is the first point of argument which we as a taxpayers should take before the relevant authorities as and when the opportunity is given to us. Now, with this background, I first of all come to the assessment. And as I said कि assessment का जो experience है, हम सब लोगों का experience अलग-अलग तरीके का है. जो लोग सर्विस टैक्स एक्साइज रिजीम से हैं, उन्हें असेसमेंट का कोई खास एक्सपीरियंस है नहीं. इनफैक्ट स्क्रूटनी ऑफ रिटर्न नाम से जो कॉन्सेप्ट था सर्विस टैक्स के अंदर, दैट कॉन्सेप्ट समवेयर केम इन द ईयर 2014-2015. उसके पहले तो स्क्रूटनी नाम से देयर वाज नो रूल इन फैक्ट व्हिच वाज एग्जिस्टिंग इन द प्रोविजन इन द लॉ, बट देयर वाज अ डिटेल्ड प्रोसीजर फॉर द ऑडिट्स व्हिच वाज गिवन. ओके. Now, in the VAT background, when somebody would talk about it, they would say there was a detailed procedure. In fact, in majority of the cases, almost majority of the assessees were issued an assessment order, और वो assessment order year on year basis के ऊपर issue करा जाता था. Now, with that background, when we come to GST side of it, कुछ चीजें हैं जिनको unlearn करने की जरूरत है. So the circumference of assessment which is given under the law, it starts from section 59 and it goes up to section 64. और जब हम 59 से 64 देखेंगे, so we realize there are various types of assessment which have been envisaged in the law. That is, first is self-assessment, then provisional assessment, then scrutiny, then non-filers, assessment of non-filers, assessment of unregistered person, and a summary assessment. And as I said in the starting, as the concept of assessment, what we understand is the measure of it. क्या मेजर है टैक्सेशन का, कितने मेजर तक लगना चाहिए, और उसका क्वांटिफिकेशन जो है, दैट इज बेसिकली द फंडामेंटल रूट ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ विच एनी एडजुडिकेशन वुड बी डन. So let's go into each and every section. Let's try to find out what are peculiar issues in each and every section. In case you have any question, you have any concern, you may write that in the chat box. If I think I'll be able to take right now, I'll happily take that. Otherwise, at the end of it, we'll try and keep 15 minutes for all these questions. Let's first of all talk about self-assessment. And I'm sure आप में से जितने भी लोगों ने कभी कोई शो कॉज नोटिस सर्विस टैक्स एक्साइज का देखा होगा, at least on my personal experience I'm saying, you would see in every show cause notice, they would write one paragraph, and that paragraph would say that it is a self-assessment regime. The department has put a huge trust and faith on the taxpayer, where the taxpayer has to correctly self-assess his tax liability and discharge to the government. In case he fails in the self-assessment, that means he is betraying the government trust, and that is why we believe that you have not paid tax deliberately with an intention to evade the government. तो उनका कॉन्सेप्ट ये है कि जब सेल्फ असेसमेंट का रिजीम है और आपने सरकार को टैक्स जमा नहीं कराया है, इसका पर्पस ही यही है कि आप सरकार का जो ट्रस्ट था, उस ट्रस्ट को आप ब्रेक करना चाहते थे. But when we look at the provisions and we see section 59 कहता क्या है, so section 59 ये कहता है that every registered person has to self-assess the tax payable under this act and furnish a return for each tax year as specified in section 39. And when you see to it, there are 3-4 anchor points in section 59 which are very important and useful.
I request everyone to please mute yourself. Thank you.
Yeah, section 59, first thing, all of us understand that is pretty obvious कि self assessment जो मुझे करने की जरूरत है, तभी मुझे करना है section 59 के हिसाब से when I am registered under the provisions of the act. Second thing it says is that you have to self-assess the tax payable under this act. And what are you going to do after self-assessment? You will furnish a return. Now, interestingly, we have a definition of return also under section 2, subsection 97, which says return prescribed or otherwise required to be furnished under this act or rules made thereunder. So there we have a definition of return. And it does not only says in 59 that to furnish the return for each tax period in 39, वो आपको टैक्स पेबल असेस करने के लिए बोलता है. जनरली हम सोचते हैं टैक्स पेमेंट की बात 59 में है या नहीं है. फॉर दैट वी हैव सेक्शन 2117 और 2117 एक डेफिनेशन देता है वैलिड रिटर्न का. वो वैलिड रिटर्न ये कहता है कि आपका सेक्शन 39 सबसेक्शन 1 का जो रिटर्न है जिसमें आपने सेल्फ असेस टैक्स लायबिलिटी को व्हेन यू हैव पेड इन फुल योर रिटर्न बिकम्स अ वैलिड रिटर्न. एंड जनरली a question which comes in is कि प्रोविजन में कहाँ ऐसा लिखा हुआ है सेक्शन 59 में कि मुझे मेरी टैक्स लायबिलिटी को पहले पे करना जरूरी है, उसके बाद ओनली आई कैन गो एंड फाइल माय रिटर्न. And in fact, this was one of those issues which is still pending in the high courts, जहां पर GST Council के जब हम minutes पढ़ते हैं, where all these ministers when they discuss, and this GST Council, which is a constitutional body, there they have accepted in one of the minutes by saying कि GST law के अंदर हमने ऐसी situation को envisage नहीं करा जहां पे हम हमेशा ये बोलते हैं कि पहले टैक्स आपको पूरा पे करना है और उसके बाद ही आप रिटर्न फाइल कर सकते हैं. In fact, they have gone on record to say that there is a possibility that a taxpayer might have only paid the part tax, but still he has gone ahead and filed the return. But because we only do not deal with the law, we also deal with the portal. We realize that portal clearly says that until unless whatever tax you are self-assessing and showing in your GSTR 3B. Why GSTR 3B? Because as of now, we understand that GSTR 3B is a return under section 39. GSTR 1, GSTR 2, all other things, they are not written under section 39. They are all statements. तो मोटी मोटी बात सेक्शन 59 के अंदर कि मेरी GSTR 3B में जो टैक्स है वो मुझे सेल्फ असेस करना है, रिटर्न मुझे फाइल करना है. 59 मुझे कहीं नहीं रोकता, वो मुझे ये नहीं कहता कि मुझे पूरा टैक्स फाइल पे करना है. पर एक 2117 है जो वैलिड रिटर्न की बात करता है. और एक रिटर्न वैलिड तभी माना जाएगा when you pay your tax in full, and that is why one conservative understanding which comes in is that you are only complying with section 59 till the time whatever tax which you want to self assess for a particular tax period you have paid in full. In fact, इसी से linked है section 49 subsection 8 जो हमको ये भी बताता है कि how are you going to pay your tax and what is the manner of paying your self assessment tax, where it says that whenever you have to pay the tax there is a certain order which you have to follow. First of all, you have to pay tax, self-assessed tax of a previous period. Then you have to pay tax for a current period. And then if there is any tax which is pending for the show cause notice which was issued under section 73, 74 या आपके against में कोई order pass हुआ था, then that tax you are going to pay. Meaning thereby, it kinds of gives you an indication or somebody would raise a question, is that does the law permit me to file my subsequent return and not filing my previous period return? The answer to that would come from section 49 subsection 8 where there is a particular manner of paying of taxes which have been given. Now interestingly, you will also find in section 59 ke andar, there are two words which is called as a tax period, and then there is a definition of tax period which is also given under the law. And the definition of tax period says that period for which you are required to file the return. And friends, this is also very important and interesting because हमको जो रिटर्न की बात करी गई है टैक्स पीरियड के अंदर वो सिर्फ सेक्शन 39 की रिटर्न की बात नहीं है. वो कहता है जिस भी पीरियड की आपको रिटर्न फाइल करनी है वो पीरियड आपका टैक्स पीरियड बन जाएगा. तो सेक्शन 39 के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में हमारा टैक्स पीरियड मंथ बन गया बिकॉज जनरली वी फाइल GSTR 3B फॉर अ पर्टिकुलर मंथ. जब हम एनुअल रिटर्न के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में टैक्स पीरियड पढ़ते हैं कभी, योर टैक्स पीरियड चेंजेस एंड बिकम्स अ पर्टिकुलर फाइनेंशियल ईयर. Now 2-3 questions which comes in there which are linked with your adjudication proceedings also, like we have section 73 subsection 11 where it talks about कि आपके ऊपर penalty लग सकती है अगर आपने अपना self assessed tax you have not paid within a period of 30 days from the due date of such tax. And 7311 says then in that case 10% of the tax or 10,000 rupees whichever is higher, जितना भी आपका self assessed tax है उसका 10% और 10,000 rupees whichever is higher उतने तक की पेनल्टी है that can be levied under section 73 subsection 11. And interestingly 7311 is a notwithstanding, it starts with a non-obstinate clause and it overrides subsection 6 and subsection 8. Subsection 6 और subsection 8 जो है वो order pass करना और उन सब चीजों के बारे में बात करते हैं. Meaning thereby law says section 59 का non-compliance अगर आप करते हैं and that non-compliance carries for a period of more than 30 days, then there is a provision in the law which says that you can be slapped with the penalty which can be up to 10% of the amount of tax or 10,000 rupees. Now that's a huge problem Why that is a huge problem? Technically what this provision says is अगर मेरा GSTR 3B मेरी ड्यू डेट जो है 3B की फाइल करने की उससे 30 डेज के बाद फाइल हो रहा है, तो प्रॉपर ऑफिसर के पास में 7311 एक टूल है जहां पे ही कैन कम एंड ही कैन से दैट आई वांट टू लेवी पेनल्टी अपॉन यू अंडर सेक्शन 73 सबसेक्शन 11. Now, in the initial year, there have been problems, maybe a technical default, maybe a lack of understanding and all those things. And that is why a circular came in, circular number 76, which came on 31st of December 2018, जहां पर उन्होंने relaxation दिया 7311 के context में. But interestingly, that relaxation is little differently worded. And that relaxation says that the penalty of 7311 may not be imposed if the assessee has filed his GSTR 3B, maybe belated, he has paid his tax, he has also paid the interest, and notice has not been issued by the proper officer. तो उनके नोटिस इशू होने से पहले अगर आपने 3B फाइल करा है और वो ड्यू डेट से 30 दिन बाद भी फाइल करा है आपने, तो 7311 की पेनल्टी नहीं लगेगी. But mind you friends, the circular says that the benefit according to the circular is available only when you pay the tax and interest. And that is why it becomes first point for us to tell all our clients that if you're filing a GSTR 3B late and you don't want to come into that particular scrutiny where tomorrow department says कि 7311 की penalty लगानी है, तो इस circular का अगर benefit लेना है, which is a beneficial circular, it is binding on the department because the circular uses the word you pay tax and interest both. Circular also says that हमारे 125 की जो general penalty है वो आपके ऊपर लगा सकते हैं, but to my understanding that penalty cannot be levied because when there is a specific provision for levy of penalty, they cannot resort to 125. So that is in context of that self-assessed liability which I have to declare in my 3B where I am filing my GSTR 3B a little delay. Then comes the second question, can there be a direct recovery of my self-assessed tax without issuance of a show cause notice? And again for that we have section 75 subsection 12 जो ये कहता है कि there is no requirement for issuance of a show cause notice under section 73 and 75. If there is any tax liability which remains unpaid and that unpaid liability relates to a return which is furnished under section 39. अब थोड़ा contradiction है यहाँ पर. Contradiction क्या है? पहला जो हमने पढ़ा, we realize and the portal also behaves in a manner that you cannot file your return under section 39 without payment of tax. Still, there is a provision under section 75 subsection 12 which say that you have furnished a return under section 39, you have not paid your tax in full, and because you have not paid your tax in full, there can be recovery proceedings against the balance part amount. Now, we realize how is that possible? So in this context, we have a judgment from Madhya Pradesh High Court in 2020 only in case of Kabir Reality. And in this case, the assessee had filed all its GSTR 1, disclosed all the outward supplies, but did not file GSTR 3B. Department ने 7512 के अंदर proceeding start करके they did a direct recovery in a 75 subsection 12. Assessee went to the High Court and he said that my lordship, the problem is in 7512 it says wherever the tax remains unpaid in respect of a return furnished under section 39, wherever I have not filed a return under section 39 at all, मैंने तो GSTR 1 file करा है, and GSTR 1 is a statement under section 37, not a return under section 39, and that is why this provision of 7512 should not be made applicable upon me. High Court said nothing doing. Whenever you are disclosing your outward liability in GSTR 1, it is as good as your self-assessed liability which you are disclosing, and hence the provision of 7512 in the given case they can be attached and a provisional attachment or anything of that sort. Whatever recovery needs to be done, it can be done. And that is why now you realize that whatever you're disclosing in your GSTR 1, that also becomes a valid ground if in case it is not matching with GSTR 3B. Though we realize that when once there are mismatches which you can explain, then it becomes a case where you can go to the department and say कि ये मेरा self-assessed tax का difference नहीं है. Then one last question in respect of this self-assessment which comes in is, can there be a recovery of interest? टैक्स की रिकवरी तो हो सकती है अगर टैक्स हमने सेल्फ असेस पूरा पे नहीं करा, और अगर चाहे मैंने 1 में डिक्लेयर कर दिया और 3B में नहीं करा, देयर इज अ पॉसिबिलिटी दैट डिपार्टमेंट कैन गो अगेंस्ट मी. इज देयर अ पॉसिबिलिटी दैट आई हैव डिस्चार्ज माय टैक्स, मे बी बिलेटेड, बट आई हैव नॉट पेड इंटरेस्ट, and tomorrow department says that for interest also we want to make a recovery under section 75 subsection 12 without issuance of a notice. And answer to that comes from this judgment of Karnataka High Court in case of LC Infra projects. I'm sure majority of us are aware about this judgment. This says that 7512 is only applicable in respect of self-assessed dues. The interest amount which you're not writing in your returns, it is not a self-assessed interest. Specifically, when the provisions of the law are little unclear in terms of how is interest going to be paid. Until the time assessee has not self-assessed interest from his own side, जब तक उसने खुद ने assess नहीं करा है, you cannot make a direct recovery under section 7512, but you have to issue a show cause notice under section 73 or 74, whatever is the case. Meaning thereby, interest you have not disclosed in your return, there cannot be a direct recovery. There has to be a show cause notice. But for tax amount which is there in your 1 but not in 3B, there is a possibility the department can go against us. So this is all about some things which are there in fact itself in section 59, where on the basis of what you're doing in your return, department can go ahead and do certain things. We come to second aspect, that is provisional assessment. Now, interestingly, provisional assessment, that is one unexplored area which one may think of using against advance rulings. So generally, all of us know that the manner in which the orders are being passed by the authority for advance rulings, they are in majority cases not favorable. At times, we realize the manner in which they analyze the law is not proper also. Now, there is a provision which is called section 60, provisional assessment, where it kind of gives you an alternate that wherever you have two types of issues, where value of goods or services or rate of tax, basically classification. तो क्लासिफिकेशन और वैल्यूएशन के इश्यूज के ऊपर, अपार्ट फ्रॉम ऑल अदर इश्यूज व्हिच आर देयर इन द एडवांस रूलिंग, फॉर दीस टू पर्टिकुलर इश्यूज, let's say one says that I want to start my business, or basically I'm entering into a transaction of which I'm not aware of all these two things, and I want to get a provisional assessment done because final assessment may take a long period of time and I don't want to be defaulter in the eyes of the government. Then they have this provisional assessment where they can go to the proper officer, they can request to the officer, there is a particular manner of filing the forms, whatever they want to basically propose. Let's say I say that my product is classifiable under 12% under this HSL, and I will give my submission. And then I have to give 3 months time to the proper officer to pass a provisional order, where he will say, okay, till the time we look into the transaction, we apply our mind, we come to a final conclusion. Within 3 months, we will provisionally tell you that you may pay tax under 12% or 18%, whatever is the case. And then you will go ahead, do your business with this particular rate of tax or with this valuation mechanism. उसके लिए they have to deposit some security, bond and all those things, कि जब भी हम final assessment करेंगे, तो उसके एवज में अगर कोई डिफरेंशियल टैक्स निकलता है जमा कराने के लिए, that you are going to, you agree to it, that you will go and they pay that particular tax. So this section 60 in these two cases at least, जहां पे भी valuation के issues है और classification के issues है, one may consider basically using this for two reasons. One, whatever order comes in, जो भी फाइनल ऑर्डर आएगा 3 महीने के अंदर एक वो प्रोविजनल असेसमेंट को ऑर्डर पास करेंगे, उसके फिर 6 महीने के अंदर दे आर गोइंग टू पास द फाइनल असेसमेंट ऑर्डर, जिसका अगर वो एक्सटेंशन चाहे तो अगले 6 महीने या 4 साल, व्हाटएवर इज द केस, डिपेंडिंग अपॉन कौन से ऑफिसर के पास में पेंडिंग है, दे में अप्लाई फॉर एन एक्सटेंशन. बट जनरल अंडरस्टैंडिंग इज 3 months प्रोविजनल असेसमेंट ऑर्डर एंड 6 months फ्रॉम देन इज गोइंग टू द फाइनल ऑर्डर. अगर इफ यू आर नॉट सेटिस्फाइड विद द ऑर्डर, यू कैन गो टू नॉर्मल अपीलेट मैकेनिज्म, और नॉर्मल अपीलेट से जाते हुए you can go ahead and then file appeal and whatever you want to do. The problem with advance ruling is that once you have an advance ruling order, then you go to then you go to the appellate authority for advance ruling, and once you go to the appellate authority for advance ruling, then you have no other further tribunal for this. Then you have to go to High Court, and High Court may take up, may not take up, depending upon, they may not like to go into the merits of the case. So maybe this is as an alternate which can be used by the taxpayers to go into provisional assessment. Then this is third, which is scrutiny assessment. ये वो assessment है जो I'm sure जिसका experience majority of us have had in last 2 years, where we get a notice in called ASMT 10. And that ASMT 10 notice, which all of us have seen, जो ये कहता है आपकी GSTR 3B और 2A में mismatch है, आपकी GSTR 1 और E-way bill के अंदर mismatch है, your TDS and your GSTR 3B are not matching, and then they issue a notice in ASMT 10 where they ask us to give us the reason, and in fact they ask us to pay the tax. Now to do all of this, they get power from section 61, and they have a rule called 99 that is called a rule for undertaking the scrutiny assessment. Now, friends, don't confuse this with the scrutiny assessment which is there in income tax. In income tax, the scrutiny assessment starts with calling of information. If it is a detailed exhaustive scrutiny assessment, if it is a limited scrutiny, still the officer would call for certain information. In GST, in scrutiny assessment, officer is not calling for the information. He cannot issue a notice by saying, I want to do your scrutiny assessment under section 61. अभी वो scrutiny assessment करने के लिए मुझे आपसे sale account, purchase account, return and all those things say. No, that is not the purpose of section 61. Section 61 in fact starts with where officer has to do some homework as his own desk. पहले उनको अपनी desk पे बैठ के कुछ काम करने की जरूरत है. They have to see a return of a particular registered person, and obviously scrutiny assessment is for the scrutiny of a return. Return can only be filed by a registered person, and hence section 61, notice under section 61 can only be issued to a registered person. Now, what will happen? He will look at your return. After looking at the return, the purpose of scrutinizing the return is to see the correctness of the return, and wherever he realizes that there is some discrepancy, he will issue a notice in ASMT 10. So there are two words which are very important. The purpose is to verify the correctness of the return and to inform the discrepancy. Now, what is correctness of the return? That is not defined. But generally what is understood is correct. First, factually correct. Second, correct in accordance with the provisions of the law. That has to be what we call as correct. So there should not be any factual inconsistency in the return. I'm sure he should have that particular information. Kyun wo keh rahe that there is a factual inconsistency. Or second, the manner in which the return has been filed, he finds that there is no provisions of the law which have been infringed or they have not been followed. अगर ये दो चीजों का कोई doubt है or he is able to find out a discrepancy, then that discrepancy he is going to inform in the notice. That's where the scrutiny notice starts. So you realize income tax ke andar or maybe in your VAT assessment that notice is to start from calling of information. Here he cannot call for information. तो अगर आपको सेक्शन 61 का ASMT 10 है and is calling for information, that notice is not valid, not proper. And once the notice is not valid and not proper, you would know over the period of time in next 3 to 4 days what needs to be done, how you are going to challenge that. I would not go into the details of it. Second thing is he can only basically scrutinize the return. Now again that question comes in, what is the return? Whether GSTR 1 is a return. So can there be a notice by saying आपके GSTR 1 और GSTR 3B के डेटा में मिसमैच है? Can there be a notice by saying आपकी e-invoicing और GSTR 1 के डेटा में मिसमैच है? Can there be a notice by saying that आपका TDS और GSTR 1 के नोटिस के अंदर डेटा के अंदर मिसमैच है? The answer is absolutely no. At least in the context of return, we understand there are 2-3 returns. पहला GSTR 3B, second your GSTR 9, and third is your final return. I'm talking about a regular taxpayer. I'm not talking about composition and all other people. So at least ये तीन लोग हैं, ये तीन है जो returns हैं. Meaning thereby, wherever you receive a notice under section 61, and it is one of the legs of that notice is not 3B or GSTR 9 or a final return, straight away you can say that this notice is not proper as per section 61 because it is not finding out any discrepancy in my return. 1 or 3B ka mismatch, both of them are not returns. And when both of them are not returns, I am not expected to answer under section 61. Officer is to find some another provision to issue a notice upon me. So again, it becomes very important to see what is return, what is that thing which is pinpointing as a discrepancy, and he is not asking for information. He is going to give a notice. I am supposed to give a reply. That reply needs to be given within 30 days. Now, there is a very interesting fact in this regard also. जब आप सेक्शन 61 पढ़ते हैं वो कहता है आपको 30 डेज के अंदर रिप्लाई करने की जरूरत है. जब आप रूल 99 पढ़ते हैं, रूल 99 ये कहता है दैट यू कैन नॉट रिप्लाई बियॉन्ड 30 डेज. ऑफिसर चाहे तो 30 दिन के समय को कर्टेल कर सकता है. अगेन हम सब जानते हैं स्टूडेंट्स ऑफ लॉ दैट अ रूल कैन नॉट ओवरपावर द सेक्शन. So technically under section 61 all of us have 30 days to give a reply. If we are giving reply on the 29th day also, that is absolutely okay. Officer cannot ask me to give a reply within 15 days or 7 days. If he is doing so, and if I want additional time, I can very well refer to section 61 and tell him that, sir, I have 30 days to give a reply. What if officer does not agree to my reply? And that's a very general question which comes in. Officer ने notice देके बोला अभी 3B और 2A में mismatch है, ये tax भरना पड़ेगा. But it is important to understand, उसने तो बोल दिया tax भरना पड़ेगा, tax नहीं भरा तो वो क्या कर सकता है? Interestingly, section 61 में इसका जवाब है, वो कुछ नहीं कर सकता है. Or at least to a limited extent, he cannot say कि अभी ये notice के base पे I am going to confirm your demand and I am going to basically ask you to pay interest, tax and penalty. Why? Because it is only the manner of intimating the discrepancy. Once you have intimated the discrepancy and he does not agree to our reply, whatever reply we are giving to him, he has 4 options. What are those 4 options? He can ask us, he can ask his relevant officer to do the audit. वो चाहे तो section 65 में audit के लिए बोल सकता है. He can ask for doing special audit under section 66. He can ask to the anti-evasion wing or to DGGST or any other relevant proper officer to conduct a search or an inquiry against that particular person. Or if it is within his power, he can issue a show cause notice under section 73 or 74. Why am I saying it is within his power? Because generally जो notice issue करते हैं section 61 के अंदर, there is a circular 3/3/2017. That 3/3/2017 defines the functional jurisdiction of the proper officer. और functional jurisdiction के हिसाब से section 61 में जो notice issue करने वाला proper officer है, at least in the CGST context, that is a superintendent. But 73-74 में जो शो कॉज इशू करने के लिए जो प्रॉपर ऑफिसर है वो सुपरिटेंडेंट तभी है अगर मैटर 20 लाख रुपीस से कम का है. अगर मैटर 20 लाख रुपीस से ऊपर का है, then that same superintendent cannot issue a show cause notice. It needs to be issued by the assistant commissioner or the higher hierarchy जितना अमाउंट है उसके हिसाब से. Meaning thereby that particular officer who is doing the scrutiny and he does not agree with our reply, 4 ऑप्शन में से उसके पास एक ही ऑप्शन है और वो ऑप्शन भी एक मॉनेटरी लिमिट तक है जहां पर वो जाके शो कॉज इशू कर सकता है, डायरेक्ट ऑर्डर तो पास नहीं कर सकता. Meaning thereby whenever there is a scrutiny notice, it is always makes sense to give a proper reply on the merit and understand that officer cannot do anything on his own. Let's say for an example, उसको लगता है कि assessee के यहाँ पे there is a lot of gray area which needs to be further investigated. Now what he will do? He will write to his concerned anti-evasion to say कि ये assessee की यहाँ पे you should do and search. Now think about this. Anti-evasion में जो बैठा वो officer है, will he be bound where he gets a notice or he gets a letter from the other counterpart or the other officer और वो उसका जो नोटिस आया उसके ऊपर पहले एक्ट अपॉन करेगा या उसके पास जो पेंडिंग केसेस उसके ऊपर एक्ट अपॉन पहले करेगा? So the law it has been designed in a manner to say that one particular person, he cannot issue a notice, he cannot decide it, but there is a particular chain, he can work and go and ask the other person to do it. As I said, 1 is not a return, GSTR 9C is also not a return, GSTR 3B is a return, GSTR 9 is a return. Second, section 61 says that you can always issue the scrutiny notice for a tax period. And again, friends, as I said, tax period has been defined in section 2106, which is period for which return is required to be filed. And that is why wherever you file your annual return for 17-18 and 18-19, or let's say 19-20, और आपके पास अगर इन तीनों सालों के कोई स्पेसिफिक पीरियड फाइनेंशियल ईयर के नोटिस आते हैं जीएसटीआर 3B के मिसमैचेस के, you can always answer by saying, I have already filed my annual return. All the discrepancies have been taken care there. You may refer to my annual return in case you have no other answer to give. Because you are saying, once I file my all annual returns, mera jo bhi monthly return hai, they all get subsumed there. Law had given me the power, law had given me the opportunity to make necessary corrections in my annual return. I have done that. Once I have done that, please don't issue notices on the basis of my monthly returns because I've already taken care of them. So that is one strong argument which one can give. Also, a notice cannot come कि आपकी GSTR 3B में और GSTR 1 में पूरे साल में इतने रुपए का difference है. No, it has to be for a tax period, and they have to specifically give the tax period कि कौन-कौन से tax period के अंदर there is a difference. So all these things, as a preliminary objection, as a tax professional, as a tax consultant, as an assessee, we should raise before giving a reply on the merit. And again, a practical experience or advice, because you can reply to your ASMT 10 only once on the portal. आप एक ही बार reply कर सकते हैं because that's how the portal has been designed. Wherever you want to raise a preliminary objection, raise that preliminary objection in an offline mode. not on the portal, because once you raise the preliminary objection on the online mode, then you again cannot reply on the merit, and then officer, he may entertain, he may not entertain, though legally there is no restriction, but then it unfortunately creates a problem where you have to actually ask the officer to take that particular thing on record. So with this, that is section 61. There are a lot of things in 61 which officer cannot do. There are a lot of things in 61 basically of which we have the power. The end and sum and substance of 61 is that the officer does not have the power to adjudicate the case in majority of the cases. He can only do that in limited cases, and we have to see that to what extent we want to entertain the notice under section 61. Then we go to non-filers, and again this is a very pertinent problem which have erupted in last 2 years. Majority of the cases जहां लोगों ने रिटर्न नहीं फाइल करा, हमने देखा कि वहां पर नोटिस इन GSTR 3A was issued कि आप 15 दिन में अपना GSTR 3B फाइल करिए, otherwise your registration is going to be cancelled or necessary action would be taken. That notice was issued under section 46, that is notice to return defaulters. Now what happens basically in case of non-filers is, in case of non-filers, basically they are not required to issue any additional separate show cause notice. So this is little different. 46 the proceedings under section 62 is a best judgment assessment. उन लोगों का जो GST में रजिस्टर्ड है और उन्होंने रिटर्न नहीं फाइल करा. 61 जो था वो उन लोगों के लिए था जो रजिस्टर्ड है और उन्होंने रिटर्न फाइल करा है. 60 उन लोगों के लिए था जो रजिस्टर्ड है या रजिस्टर्ड होना चाहते हैं and they want to undertake a specific transaction. Okay. So 62, we are talking about a best judgment assessment. Person was required to file the return. He was asked to basically file the return. He was given a time period of 15 days. जितना उसका due date के बाद उसको notice आया, that person has not filed the return, and hence now officer, he thinks that he has no other option, so he would go ahead and do a best judgment assessment and assess the liability in the form called ASMT 13 that comes from GST portal. Now, generally, in best judgment assessment, all of us understand, again, from the income tax experience and from old VAT experience, that it is done on the estimates. But there are a lot of judgments, again, from the Supreme Court only, which they say that estimate has to be reasonable and it should be based on some prudent and some previous experience or some background of the business. But having said that, that is what, that's the judicial precedence. All of us know on the ground level there is a little challenge in terms of कि अगर 46 का नोटिस आया और रिटर्न नहीं फाइल करा है एंड ऑफिसर ने अगर 62 का प्रोसीडिंग स्टार्ट करा है, सो ऑफिसर कैन वेरी वेल से कि आपका पिछले 2 साल का जो भी GSTR 3B में डेटा था उसके बेसिस के ऊपर मानते हुए मैं मानता हूं आगे आपका ये टर्नओवर होने वाला है. इनफैक्ट आई हैव सीन अ केस वेयर दे हैव सेड आपकी GSTR 2A के अंदर इतना इनवर्ट सप्लाईज आ रहा है, उस इनवर्ट सप्लाईज के ऊपर आपकी इंडस्ट्री का 20% प्रॉफिट मार्जिन में ऐड करता हूं. ये ऐड करने के बाद मैं मानता हूं ये आपकी आउटपुट सप्लाई की वैल्यू है जिसपे इतने रेट के हिसाब से टैक्स बनता था. यू हैव नॉट पेड द टैक्स एंड आई एम डूइंग योर असेसमेंट अंडर 62 ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ इट. 62 says that there is no requirement for issuance of a show cause notice under section 73 and 74, and again because this 62 starts with a notwithstanding 73-74, meaning thereby we cannot go and challenge कि पहले ये tax liability identify करने से पहले मुझे एक notice तो देते आप 73-74 के अंदर. Because it comes under the assessment, officer is saying I already gave you opportunity to self-assess tax under 46 by giving a notice under 46. You have not done that. Let me do a self-assessment. When I do the self-assessment, I am again giving you one more opportunity. And this opportunity is very essential, very crucial, which none of the taxpayers should basically think of not availing. What is this? 62 कहता है कि अगर आपका बेस्ट जजमेंट असेसमेंट हो गया है and there is an order in ASMT 13 which has been issued to you, within 30 days of the service of ASMT 13, you are required to file a valid return. Now friends, in 62 they are using the word valid return, they are not using the word return. Unlike section 59 जो हमने सेल्फ असेसमेंट का सेक्शन देखा था वहां पे शब्द रिटर्न इस्तेमाल हुआ था, यहां पर 62 में जो वर्ड यूज हुआ है दैट इज वैलिड रिटर्न, मीनिंग देयरबाय विद इन रिसीट ऑफ 30 डेज ऑफ ASMT 13 the registered person is required to file a valid return, pay the tax, pay the complete tax whatever he self assesses. So again that's the second caveat. ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है कि जो बेस्ट जजमेंट असेसमेंट के अंदर डिपार्टमेंटल ऑफिसर ने या प्रॉपर ऑफिसर ने बोला है कि आपको इतने रुपए का टैक्स पे करने की जरूरत है, the assessee may choose not to do so. He may self-assess tax on the basis of his understanding, his record, file GSTR 3B. Moment he files GSTR 3B within 30 days of the service of the order, that ASMP 13 will stand withdrawn. ये जो बेस्ट जजमेंट असेसमेंट है ये निगेट हो जाएगा. Now what happens when the best judgment assessment becomes it's negated? Now assessee has filed a return under section 59. अब इसके बेसिस पे अगर डिपार्टमेंट चाहे कि उसको 73 74 में शोकॉज करना है, ये कहते हुए कि हमारे हिसाब से तो बेस्ट जजमेंट इतना था पर आपने रिटर्न के अंदर फिगर कम दिखाया है, एंड दैट इज व्हाई वी वांट टू रिकवर द एडिशनल टैक्स, डिपार्टमेंट में गो अहेड एंड इशू अ नोटिस अंडर 73 74. कितना वैलिड होगा कितना वैलिड नहीं होगा, सही है गलत है, वो डिस्कशन बात का है, but at least हमें 62 से बाहर आ सकते हैं. Meaning thereby it becomes very important for the assessee and for us to see wherever you have not filed a return, always tell your client to check on the GST portal where there is any best judgment order which has been issued under section 62. From the 30 days of service of the order, you have to ensure that the return is filed. Once the return is filed, this order is withdrawn. Now, what happens when you don't file the return within 30 days? And this matter came up before the Kerala High Court in case of this Bridge Hygiene Services Private Limited, where assessee did everything all right after passing an order under section 62. उसने टैक्स जमा करा दिया, सब चीजें कर दी, उससे गलती सिर्फ इतनी सी हुई कि जो उसको रिटर्न फाइल करनी थी, टैक्स तो उसने कैश लेजर में जमा करा दिया, क्रेडिट लेजर में उसके पास पैसा था, उसने जो रिटर्न फाइल करना था वो रिटर्न 30 डेज में नहीं फाइल करके मे बी ऑन 33rd or 34th day he filed the return. The officer said, I cannot do anything, now my best judgment order becomes final, I cannot withdraw it because law में 30 days का time limit है. Assessee went to the High Court, requested the High Court that my lordship, I have complied with all the provisions, substantive provisions of the law. I paid the tax, I have also filed the return, only there is a delay of 3-4 days. Please condone that delay and please ask the officer to withdraw the order. High Court said that time limit, that is of 30 days, it is written in the provision. As a judiciary, we cannot rewrite the provision. Assessee is duty bound to comply with it, and hence, if you have not filed the return within 30 days, unfortunately, that order cannot be withdrawn. Meaning thereby, best judgment order will stand. If you don't agree to it, go to the first appellate authority, file an appeal against it. That is why, friends, it becomes very important that in case of best judgment, it is taken care of. Again, Kerala High Court, one more judgment in respect of best judgment which came in PB Enterprises, where the assessee said that order was not served to him. उसको order ही serve नहीं हुआ, इसलिए वो return नहीं file कर पाया. Department said we had already uploaded the order on the GST portal, and uploading of order on the GST portal is a valid compliance. It is proper according to the provisions of the law, and that is why this best judgment assessment will stand. We will come to this uploading of order at the last, and I have a slightly different view on this, and I think that is going to be very crucial in the times to come. We can use that, but we will park this for the time being. We will come to at the end कि क्या portal पे upload करने से it can be said the order has been properly served. But right now, for the time being, we would say that the High Court has said once you upload the order on the portal, that becomes valid. और आपने अगर उसको check नहीं करा from the date of uploading of 30 days, then your right under 62 is lost. Now, friends, all of these provisions of assessment, इनकी time limit क्या है? That question would obviously come up. ये टाइम लिमिट क्या है? एंड टाइम लिमिट फॉर ऑल ऑफ दिस, चाहे वो 61 का असेसमेंट हो स्क्रूटनी या 62 का हो या आगे हम 63 का जो असेसमेंट देखेंगे, ऑल ऑफ दैट इज विद इन 5 years फ्रॉम द ड्यू डेट ऑफ फाइलिंग ऑफ एनुअल रिटर्न. तो अगर कोई किसी को 17-18 का बेस्ट जजमेंट असेसमेंट करना है या किसी को 17-18 की रिटर्न्स की स्क्रूटनी करनी है, the officer has 5 years from the due date of filing of annual return. That is, the filing of annual return for 17-18 was 31st of January 2020. So 31st of January 2020, वहां से 5 years approximately, that becomes 2025. So officer has lot of time in this regard basically to do the best judgment assessment. जिन्होंने return नहीं file करा या जिन्होंने return file करा और उनका scrutiny assessment अगर वो करना चाहते हैं. Then comes assessment of unregistered person. अभी तक जिनके भी assessment हो रहे थे वो सब registered थे, चाहे return file कर रहे थे या नहीं कर रहे थे. This is for unregistered. That is a taxable person who is liable to be registered but has not taken the registration, और उस रजिस्ट्रेशन हैज बीन suo motu cancelled by the officer. And I'm sure आपने 63 के जो असेसमेंट है ASMT 14 के अंदर आपने नोटिसेस काफी देखे होंगे इन दिनों में, जहां पर जिन्होंने रिटर्न नहीं फाइल करे या जो रजिस्टर्ड नहीं थे और जिनका suo motu रजिस्ट्रेशन कैंसिल कर दिया गया किसी भी कारण से, और suo motu रजिस्ट्रेशन कैंसिल होने के बाद वाला जो पीरियड है आफ्टर द डेट ऑफ कैंसिलेशन, उन सब लोगों का जो असेसमेंट है दैट हैज हैपेंड अंडर सेक्शन 63. Now what this provision says, it is almost like 62 बेस्ट जजमेंट असेसमेंट. फर्क सिर्फ इतना है 62 के अंदर कोई अलग से नोटिस देने की जरूरत नहीं है, क्योंकि वहां पे ऑलरेडी GSTR 3A इशू होता है सेक्शन 46 में, जो ये कहता है आप रिटर्न फाइल करिए. क्योंकि सेक्शन 63 में नोटिस इशू नहीं हो सकता रिटर्न फाइल करने के लिए, बिकॉज असेसी हिमसेल्फ इज नॉट रजिस्टर्ड. दैट इज व्हाई शो कॉज नोटिस इज गिवन इन ASMT 14, जिसमें 15 दिन की समय दिया जाता है दैट यू टू गिव अ रिप्लाई कि क्यों आपका बेस्ट जजमेंट असेसमेंट नहीं किया जाए. If assessee gives the reply on the basis of this, very good. If assessee doesn't give the reply, still that is okay. Department would go ahead and do a best judgment assessment under ASMT 15. Again, यहाँ पर 73-74 की proceedings को override किया गया है. They are not required to basically go into details of 73-74. Now this 63, it cannot be withdrawn because obviously you are not registered. You are not going to file your return. So this is even more grave because in terms of once an assessment has been done under section 63, the only option available is basically to go ahead and file an appeal in this regard. So that is why all those who are unregistered, they should take care of this, that all their dues, previous liabilities, they are paid. If they're not paid and they have a notice under 63, do not take that notice lightly, because once a best judgment assessment is done, and all of us know how best judgment assessment is done, it becomes very difficult for them to basically defend that, and for going into appeal, they have to deposit a pre-deposit. Last is a summary assessment. Basically, what summary assessment says is that in some cases where department is of the view कि अगर हमने assessment पहले नहीं करा, तो there is a possibility that we might lose out on the revenue. For various reasons, like for example, let's say department is of the understanding कि assessee अपने assets का transfer करने वाला है and he has not paid the tax and deliberately is going to do the transfer because उसके बाद फिर उससे recovery नहीं हो सके, or he might be absconding, or he might basically become absconding after a certain period of time. And all these reasons, once the proper officer has reasons to believe, he would go to his senior, maybe additional commissioner or joint commissioner, take a permission from him. On the basis of return permission, he will go ahead and pass an assessment order. जो भी उसके पास में circumstances available है उसके basis पे, and in fact he would not give a proper opportunity of being heard. पुराने वाले सब में आपने देखा कि चाहे नॉन फाइलर के केस में उसको अपॉर्चुनिटी थी 3A का नोटिस देके, अनरजिस्टर्ड के केस में एक शो कॉज इशू हो रहा था. 64 का एक ऐसा पिक्यूलर केस है जहां पर प्रॉपर ऑफिसर ने अगर अपने सीनियर का परमिशन लिया है, that senior has given the permission, then on the basis of it he would go ahead and do the assessment in the interest of the revenue. Now subsection 2 says कि once the assessment has been done and the additional commissioner or the joint commissioner thinks that that assessment was not proper, it was erroneous, या फिर जिसके ऊपर assessment किया गया है, he comes forward and he writes an application to this joint commissioner and additional commissioner by saying that assessment was not proper, he gives his reason, then that joint commissioner or additional can withdraw the assessment order under section 64 and then proceeding 73-74 की मतलब एक normal show cause notice जैसे issue किया जाता है वो issue होगा. Obviously, when you have a normal show cause notice, you have opportunity to give a reply, you have opportunity to get your personal hearing, and then there is an order in that regard. So 64, only in exception circumstances, department can basically invoke. Now, practically and unfortunately, I have seen a case where somebody who had basically had an additional place of business and they have stored their goods on additional place of business. The only error which they did was they did not get their additional place of business registered in GST. 15 दिन के अंदर registration कराना होता है. They did not get that in 15 days. They did not add that in the additional registration. Suddenly, a team of officers came in the additional place of business. They realized that this is unregistered or not added to the RC. Under section 64, they took the permission from the additional commissioner and they did an assessment of all the goods which were lying on the additional place of business, or only assessment kar diya. And unfortunately, when an application was moved to the additional commissioner did not agree to the request of the assessee and he did not withdraw that particular order. Now this is not proper because 64 के अंदर एक important condition है कि पहले you have to take prior permission and it has to be, there has to be sufficient ground to believe that any delay in doing so may adversely affect the interest of the revenue. So wherever there is an assessment under section 64, it is always advised that assessee should write to the proper officer and seek reasons कि आपने क्या reason है जिस कारण से मेरा assessment section 64(1) में कराया. You may compare it with pari materia with section 148 of the income tax, जहाँ पे जो reassessment और income escaping assessment जो होते हैं, जहाँ पे assessee can ask for the reasons of doing so. Similarly, in 64, you can ask for the reason. Officer is duty bound to give the reason. If officer is not giving the reason, probably the assessment which has been done in the 64 at the outset, that assessment is improper. So that is one care in 64 which one may really look at. Now these are assessment proceedings. As I said initially in the starting, if you remember the picture which I had shown, assessment एक रास्ता था जिसके बेसिस पे शो कॉज नोटिस इशू हो सकता था. एंड हमने देखा देयर इज लॉट ऑफ बैक एंड फोर्थ, कुछ केस में इशू होगा, कुछ में इशू नहीं होगा, कुछ में स्पेसिफिक टाइम लिमिट में इशू होगा. The other option which is available with the department is GST audit. कि अगर वो चाहे तो GST audit के रास्ते से अंदर आ सकते हैं और वो असेसमेंट वाला रूट ना ले. Now Prem Bhai in his opening remark correctly pointed out that approach of GST audit of central department and the state department is altogether different. And that is the reason for that is because for state, GST audit is a new concept. At least in Rajasthan, I know that in Rajasthan VAT, they had provision of business audit. But that business audit was for a very limited period of time. In fact, जब GST आया था, उसके 1-1.5 साल 2 साल पहले से वो provision आया था और उसको effectively implement भी नहीं किया गया था. And the situation which you have in Gujarat, same situation we have in Rajasthan, where we do not have a separate audit commissionerate, at least in the state. You go to the center side of it, obviously there is a separate commissionerate. In fact, the circulars of the center clearly point out कि एक जो GST audit का commissionerate है पूरा, वो क्या चीजें कर सकते हैं, क्या चीजें नहीं कर सकते हैं. Can they issue a show cause notice? Can they adjudicate a show cause notice? To that extent also, they have basically given the guidelines. So that is why your experience is going to be altogether different, depending upon आपके assessee का audit कौन कर रहा है, center कर रहा है या state कर रहा है. Like for example, before I go to all of this, in one of the cases where State Department issued a notice for conducting the audit ADD 01 in one of our clients' case, the departmental officer was of the understanding that it is as good as investigation, it is as good as inspection. He said, मैंने ऑडिट का नोटिस दिया है ADD 01, मतलब अब मेरे पास पावर है कि मैं आपके प्रेमाइसेस में आ सकता हूँ, आपका स्टॉक का फिजिकल वेरिफिकेशन कर सकता हूँ, आपके एम्प्लॉइज का स्टेटमेंट रिकॉर्ड कर सकता हूँ, आपकी ड्रॉर्स को खोल सकता हूँ. I can look out for all those documents and I can basically make a summary of all of those things. Whether that is possible, not possible, the answer to that comes from the definition of audit which is given under section 2, subsection 13. I'm sure पिछले साल तक जब किसी और स्पीकर ने आपका GST 9 और GST 9C का कोई सेशन लिया होगा तो आपसे ऑडिट के प्रोविजंस के ऊपर चर्चा करी होगी. तब हमने जो ऑडिट पढ़ी थी वो हमारे पर्सपेक्टिव से पढ़ी थी, फ्रॉम द चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट्स पर्सपेक्टिव व्हेन वी हैड टू कंडक्ट द ऑडिट. Now the same definition it is also applicable on the departmental audit which is to be done under section 65. And what is this saying? It says audit means examination of record, return and other documents. So that is finished. That's the first part. That audit is only limited to record, return and other documents. Compare this with assessment. Assessment, majority of that was limited only to the return. In fact, the officer did not have power to go beyond the return. Audit के अंदर scope थोड़ा enlarged है, वो record, return और documents तीनों उसके scope में cover होते हैं. Maintained or furnished by the registered person under this act or rules made thereunder or under any other law for the time being in force. And that is why when an officer of the audit says, I want a reconciliation of 26 AS with GST returns. So all of us know that is next to impossible because Income Tax Act ka 26 AS is on a different footing. Our GST 3B is on a different footing. But whether he can ask for 26 AS or not, the answer in all probabilities would be yes, because it is a document which has been furnished by the SSC which was there in any other law for the time being in force. Meaning thereby, if there is any record, return or document under Companies Act, under Income Tax Act, and the Partnership Act, which is applicable on that particular assessee, and the officer says that I want it, then in that case, if assessee has maintained it, he is duty bound to give that. If assessee wants to give it voluntarily, then obviously he has given that. But again, the words are, it should have been maintained by him or furnished by him. In some cases, assessee can take a view by saying, I have not maintained 26 AS. This has been maintained by, not by me, maybe by income tax department, don't ask from me. But according to me, and because I'm speaking on a chartered accountant's platform, I'm saying this is an advocate view. This is not a chartered accountant's view. Because if at the inception, when the officer is asking for the document, and I am saying I will not give 26 AS to you, basically at the starting point, I'm saying those things without in fact giving the document. I am saying few things to him where I'm telling him that I would only be restricted in my approach of cooperation. Okay, and I will come to this part also, that what is that cooperation which is expected at the time of getting the audit done. But agar at the initial level I am saying I am not going to give this document. One is he's asking me to prepare a document which I don't have. Then obviously I get a support from the law by saying I have not maintained this document. Something which is available, something which is on a click of a button, but I am saying I am not going to give it to you because it is not covered by 213. Probably in my understanding, that would not be a correct approach. So audit is of these three things, either maintained or furnished under GST or under any other law which is applicable on the assessee. And what is the purpose? I think purpose is quite clear, basically to verify that you've paid the tax, you've done the compliances and everything of that sort. One important thing is, can auditor or departmental auditor rely on the documents of other act? The answer is yes, he may do so. But obviously, वो reliance होने से पहले he has to seek our explanation. Meaning thereby, मेरा कंपनीज एक्ट में जो मेरे फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट साइन हुए हैं और जो मैंने अकाउंटिंग स्टैंडर्ड्स का कंप्लायंस किया है और उसमें रिलेटेड पार्टी डिस्क्लोजर में जो मैंने लोगों के नाम लिखे हैं, ऑडिटर टुमारो कैन नॉट गेट अप एंड टेल मी कि ये जो नाम लिखे हैं सब रिलेटेड पार्टी है और इन सब के ट्रांजेक्शंस के साथ में आई अंडरस्टैंड दैट द ट्रांजेक्शन वैल्यू इज नॉट प्रॉपर एंड आई वांट टू इन्वोक द वैल्यूएशन रूल्स. He can't do that. He may rely on it. He has to ask me that give a justification of the transaction value. I have to reply to it. If he is not satisfied with my reply, then he may go ahead and do whatever he wants to do. So that's the whole purpose of audit. It is limited with the books of accounts and records and everything of that sort. Few things which I have picked up, and basically it is mainly on the basis of experience which comes from the audit, some on the basis of audit manual of which Priyambai talked about in the starting, and some on the basis of what practically a department is doing. So first of all, they will issue an ADT 01. Now again, a very important part is ADT 01, it can be issued by a proper officer. Who is the proper officer? Uske liye there is a circular 3/3/2017. मतलब अगर लिखा है that the superintendent is going to be the proper officer, then superintendent basically has to issue it. If superintendent is not the proper officer and let's say AC is the proper officer, maybe in case of state, I am talking from the perspective of center where superintendent can issue it. If he is not the proper officer, then probably things were going to change. Okay. So first thing I should check ADT 01 where they intimate to me that they want to conduct the audit under section 50-65 और वो audit conduct करने के लिए there are certain information which they want us to give to them. Whether they can seek information, the answer to that is yes. In ADT 01, they can seek information again on the basis of जो हमने audit का definition पढ़ा था. Now, where can they do the audit? That's the second part. They can do audit at their own office and they can do audit at the premises of the assessee also. Both is possible. In fact, in this pandemic time, at least in the central side, the instructions to the audit commissionerate and all the subordinate officers have been try and conduct the audit in the departmental premises only in cases where the data is very bulky, data is complicated, the assessee expresses his unwillingness to bring the data or inability to bring the data before the department in the departmental premises. Then by seeking a prior permission, you may visit to the assessee's premise. मीनिंग देयर बाय अगर डिपार्टमेंटल ऑफिसर बोलता है कि मेरे को तो आपकी प्रेमाइसेस में ही आके ऑडिट करना है, बट यू आर टेलिंग द ऑफिसर कि सर आप जो इंफॉर्मेशन मांगोगे आई विल ब्रिंग दैट टू योर प्रेमाइस, then in that case, officer cannot force me to say that he would still want to come here. How does the audit generally happen? It is not done by only one person. It is an AC basically who is the main field officer. He is the in charge. Under him there is superintendent and inspector. In majority of the cases, the superintendent and two inspectors, or maybe two superintendent and one inspector, they would come and visit the premises of the assessee if they have to visit, or if in case they're doing at their premise, superintendent and inspectors are going to be those persons who will have first brush with your documents. If your assessee or your client is a large assessee and department has its own definition of categorizing the assessees, they have a high risk-based assessee, medium risk-based assessee, low risk-based assessee. They have a large category assessee, medium and small. ये सब categorization के जो parameters है, they're internal. Some are on the basis of turnover, some are on the basis of ratio analysis, some are on the basis of what previous conduct of the assessee has been. उसके basis के ऊपर they allot the timeline. That in case of a large assessee, they would do the audit for 7 to 10 days. In case of medium assessee, they would do in 4 to 5 days. In small assessee, they would do it in 2 to 3 days. Again, these timelines are indicative. They are not mandatory कि 7 दिन के अंदर audit करना ही है, but generally they do it, they ration it in a manner कि वो time limit के अंदर they try and complete that. So they may come, they may not come, but at least as of now, the first thing is that they should try and do that in their premise. Only when you cannot provide the data or they realize it is very complicated, then they would come to your premise. Second is, it is to be understood that it is not a search. And once it is not a search, so 67 के अंदर जो extended powers है, या उसके आगे वाले provisions के अंदर 68 and आगे and all those things, those provisions are not applicable here. मतलब they cannot summon a specific person by saying audit team बोलेगी MD को बुलाइए और मुझे MD का statement record करना है. They can't do that. In fact, they can't say कि I want to visit the whole factory और मुझे पहले manufacturing process देखना है, समझना है, मुझे physical verification stock का करना है. He can't do that. His access is restricted to the record, document and return. At max, if it is coming to your premise, you can facilitate them to make them sit in a particular accounts room or auditor's room. And they may have a limited access there only. They may call for information on the basis of these three things, but they cannot force you. Obviously, if you want them to visit the premise, most welcome, you may do so. You want them to look at the stock, you want them to look at the manufacturing process, you can do so. But they cannot force the assessee by saying that I want to do this. That is not within their powers. That is not possible. Can they do audit for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? I think this Prem Bhai has already said that on whatever annual returns you have filed, on the basis of those annual returns, they can say that we want to conduct the audit for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. In fact, it is always better whenever audit team is coming in and they're conducting the audit, you tell them to maximize their audit scope and do the audit for the maximum possible period so that it becomes administratively easier and it becomes more convenient and better for you so that you don't have to face another audit team in a short period of time. Most important thing in all of this thing to understand is once you look at the document, they put their observation, majority of them are oral. But wherever you realize that he may basically go ahead and issue an audit report. So ultimately audit conclude कैसे होता है? They would issue an audit report जिसके अंदर audit paragraphs होंगे जहाँ पे they would raise their objections. Obviously, no auditor is going to give you a certificate that your company is an A-class company doing absolutely everything all right. But they are going to go by the exception, meaning thereby जहाँ जहाँ उनको लगेगा there is a lapse, जहां जहां उनको लगेगा there is a revenue leakage or there is additional tax which needs to be paid, they will rate as an objection. But that audit para, जो जिसको हम टेक्निकल भाषा में audit para कहते हैं, उससे पहले it is always important that you insist the audit team by saying please raise the audit objection in writing. And in fact, the audit manual issued, it also says, it instructs the officer that whenever you want to raise an objection or a query, put that in writing, and assessee should also reply in writing. In fact, whatever you want to answer, even if some of your employees has given an answer which is not proper or you're scared, maybe this answer would go against you, it is always better at the day end, you write a letter to them. If they take them physically, good. If they don't take it physically, just write an email to them. Writing an email and telling a reply to the query which they might have asked orally also, and obviously which is in your favor, which you are able to defend, it is always going to help you. It is always going to help you when you will reply to the show cause notice. Then there is one thing which is called as MCM meeting. MCM meeting से हमारा कोई लेना देना नहीं है. In fact, we are not party to this MCM meeting. But again, as a tax professional, we should be aware. MCM meeting is where all these audit officers, superintendent, inspectors, ACs, they go and report the audit commissionerate, their commissioner once in a month, where they discuss what all audits which were done in the last month, what were the relative paras which were issued, and on the basis of those paras they discuss each of their understanding and decide whether a certain para needs to be kept or it needs to be dropped. The reply given by the SSC, if it is given before the MCM, that is also discussed. Now again it becomes very important कि आपको पता हो कि MCM कब है. Again, you can ask this only on the basis of what basically officer would tell you. Obviously, informally, he is not duty bound to tell you. But if you know that MCM is on the next month, generally the understanding is that your audit report or whatever audit has been done of your SSC, it is going to be discussed in the MCM. Because only after the discussion in the MCM, the audit report in ADT 02 is issued. Now, friends, ADT 02, it can be issued by the officer above the rank of assistant, deputy, or additional. And always remember, any ADT 2 issued by the superintendent, that is without the jurisdiction. तो अगर ऐसा कोई आपको ऑडिट रिपोर्ट आ रहा है जो सुपरिटेंडेंट ने बनाकर दिया हुआ है, वो ऑडिट रिपोर्ट ही गलत है, दैट इज नॉट अ प्रॉपर ऑडिट रिपोर्ट, और उसके बेसिस पे अगर कोई शो कॉज नोटिस इशू हो रहा है, we can always challenge the jurisdiction of that particular audit report. What can audit commissioner do at max? They can at max on the basis of audit report issue a show cause notice. They cannot adjudicate a show cause notice, and again that is one thing we should be aware of. Whenever audit commissioner or you will issue a notice from the audit, it will always be written कि इसका जवाब जो है वो आपको अपने jurisdictional deputy commissioner, additional commissioner and people of that sort you have to give. You don't have to give reply to the same audit. तो ऑडिट का काम सिर्फ ऑडिट रिपोर्ट बनाने तक है. वहां तक के जितने भी रिप्लाईज हैं, इनफैक्ट ऑडिट रिपोर्ट का भी जो रिप्लाई है, यू हैव टू गिव टू द ऑडिट. Once audit has done that, either they will drop a para or they will keep a para. If they were keeping a para, they will issue a show cause notice. On the basis of the show cause notice, you are required to reply to your concerned range or division office, and then they will adjudicate it. और उसके हिसाब से they will go ahead and issue they will go ahead and issue whatever order they want to issue. 2-3 questions in terms of audit which generally comes up is, if a scrutiny of return has already taken place, can audit be done? Like for example, मुझे एक tax period का ASMT 10 notice आया हुआ है, तो क्या मुझे audit का notice आ सकता है? The answer is yes. But जो issue आपकी scrutiny के अंदर cover हो चुका है, you can always request the officer, you can always tell the audit team not to take up that issue because that issue has already been taken up in some another proceeding. And the officer is duty bound to not take that issue up. Even if he takes that up and he decides that there is basically a tax evasion or tax has been short paid, आपके पास एक बड़ा स्ट्रॉन्ग आर्गुमेंट है अपने रिप्लाई में ये देने के लिए कि ये मैटर ऑलरेडी किसी और डिपार्टमेंटल ऑफिसर ने देखा हुआ था, बट चूंकि वो रिप्लाई देखा हुआ था, आपने वापस से उठाया, मेरे ऊपर पेनल्टी नहीं लग सकती क्योंकि मैंने जानबूझ के कोई चोरी नहीं की है. ये चीज डिपार्टमेंट के नोटिस पे ऑलरेडी थी. If a search has happened, can audit be done? Now, there is no legal answer to this, but practically if a search has been done and those issues which have not been taken up in the search, maybe for that particular period, an audit can be done by the department. However, wherever search has been done, you can always take a plea by saying, अगर audit में कोई नया issue raise होता है, then in all those cases, wherever there is any demand which for which they want to issue show cause notice, you can tell them by saying that for this no penalty can be levied against me because already department is इसके respect में documents को देख चुका है. Do we get additional time to reply to ADT 01? The answer is absolutely yes. We do get time. I'm sure आपको इस pandemic के time बहुत सारे ADT 1 issue हुए होंगे. You would have sought time, but it is always expected that you seek a reasonable time and give the information which is available with your ready hand. Because again, friends, the people who are actually doing the audit at the ground level, without any offense to anybody, without giving any loose comment, but they have preliminary and basic understanding of the provisions of the law, to which they report to their senior, probably who would be better equipped to understand the critical issues. And that is why it is always favorable and always advisable from the perspective of the assessee that he cooperates with the officer at the lower level. He gives a proper reply to them. He provides all the necessary information to them. And rather than arguing on the provisions of the law, they should be able to bring out all the facts before these the officers who are looking at the documents. तो पर्पस हमारा ये होना चाहिए कि फैक्चुअली कोई चीज है जो यहाँ पर नहीं छूट जाए, या कोई फैक्चुअली कोई चीज हम गलत प्रेजेंट नहीं कर दे. मे बी ऑन द प्रोविजंस ऑफ द लॉ, the first brush with the audit team may not be the correct appropriate forum. You may bring out the provision of the law, but majority of the cases what happens is on the basis of provision of the law, they might not like to drop a para. They would still like to take it further, and maybe in the MCM, maybe at the time of finalization of that report, or maybe at the time of issuance of show cause notice, they may consider dropping the para. So at the initial level, facts are more important rather than interpretation of the provisions of the law. The most important question which comes up is the officer is saying, give me the backup of your books of account. Give me tally. They say, you give me tally. They say, you give me access to your books. Give me access to ERP. Am I duty bound to give that? The answer to that is no. You're not duty bound to give that. But again, if you're not giving that, what are you going to give it to them? One theoretical answer comes up is give everything in hard copy, give everything in PDF. But I am saying theoretical because, again, the person with whom you are dealing, you're telling him that your cooperation is going to be very limited. And then on that limited cooperation, you cannot expect that person is also going to understand what you're trying to say. So it is always better that your books of account, which are any which way audited, which are final, if possible, to best possible manner, without compromising with the security, without compromising with the secrecy, if it is possible to give to them, my understanding would be give it to them. Okay. In case you want to give everything in a converted format without giving the access to all books of account, that is also possible. In a sense to say, the best approach is give them a detailed trial balance. Ask them that on the basis of trial balance, you may ask a copy of a ledger account. I would give you the copy of a ledger account. In case you want the copy of ledger in Excel, I will give you the copy of the Excel. But in case you're saying whole books of account, our management does not allow us to do so. And that is rightly so. We cannot take this from outside the premises. On the basis of this, can officer say, now I want to visit a premise because you are not bringing books of account to me? That is a possibility. He may seek a permission from a senior that by saying that books of account are not being given to me and I want to visit the premise, that is a possibility which the officer can do. As I said, physical verification of stock, not possible. They can't do that. They may look at the physical verification report. That is possible. So if there is an internal audit report which talks about physical verification report, on the 31st March, there is a physical verification report. They may have access to it, but they can't say that today we want to do the physical verification. That is not possible. Is it necessary to pay tax at the time of audit? Absolutely no. And that is, I'm sure no audit officer is going to say he agrees that you don't pay tax. He will say to whatever you're agreeing, pay tax. The answer is you have to see, and that's again a professional judgment which comes in. If there is a para on which you want to contest, but still you see that there is a possibility that you may not be able to succeed, there is a 50-50% chance, it is always better to pay the tax under protest. Why? So that interest which if at all it is going to be paid, that quantum of interest would be stopped of that particular day. Second, when it comes to adjudication of the penalty provisions, the payment of tax at the time of the audit, it is going to be a very relevant factor in determining whether penalty needs to be paid or need not to be paid. I am not saying it is going to be final, but I am saying it is going to be a relevant, important factor along with the other facts of the case. So wherever you think that you have a 50-50% chance, or it matters of the probability, but still you want to contest it, it is not necessary that you agree and you pay the tax immediately, completely, and then you say, now what should I do? Pay tax under protest. And this question generally comes up, what is this concept of paying tax under protest? Where are the provisions of the law? Which provision of the GST Act says that I can pay tax under protest? The answer to that is there is no provision under the law which says you can pay tax under protest. The only purpose of paying tax under protest is you're saying you don't agree to what officer is saying, and you want a show cause notice, you want to contest the matter. Yet, in case you lose the matter in future, the tax which you have already paid, it may be appropriated, and the interest may only be charged to the extent what has been paid to that particular date. In case you want to pay penalty under protest, you can also do so. So there are cases where I want to pay tax, I want to pay interest, I want to pay 15% penalty also under protest. Can I do so? The answer to that is yes, I can do so, and still I can request the officer to issue a show cause notice. But ध्यान किस चीज का करना है? जब भी आप टैक्स का पेमेंट कर रहे हैं अंडर प्रोटेस्ट, ensure you don't pay that under section 73(5) or 74(5). And that's one general mistake which all of us do. Whenever we file a DRC 03, the officer says इसको 74(5) में 73(5) में pay कर दो. The problem is 73(5) and 74(5) are a voluntary payment where you're saying now you don't want to contest the matter further and you have agreed to it. But there is an option on DRC which says others. Go to others, pay tax under others. There is a remark column. Write whatever you want to write in the remark, pay the amount and give it to the officer. The audit officer will be happy because he will have recovery to show to his senior. You will be saved because now you will get a show cause notice and you will have right to contest rather than paying tax in a 74(5) and then wondering what needs to be done. And then obviously it is a trade-off. Again, last point, I don't know how many of us would agree, but if the officer wants to make a para for interest and late fees and some general penalty, you should always tell him, sir, please make this para, I don't have a problem. And then officer has 3 paras like this and 1 para officer is convinced that he may drop it. But against that, he wants a trade-off of these 3-4 paras. I think that is always better, always judicial, always a prudent professional mind to say, if you want to close and settle the matter at the lower level only. So that is few things in respect of audit which one can take care of. I will quickly take 2-3 things in of audit and then last point I'll come to limitation. There are certain things which audit team generally takes up at the first go. I mean, on the basis of look at the document, they will identify certain things. Like in some of the experiences which I had in last 6 months to 1 year, some 3-4 things which at least in Rajasthan I have seen audit teams have picked up. One is they're saying your registration certificate is not updated. Now, this came to me as a surprise because this was one thing which probably majority of us would not have in fact bothered taking care of it on a yearly basis. What audit team is saying, they are saying you bring your registration certificate, also bring the application in REG1 which you have filed at the time of registration. Now there is rule 99, rule 19. Rule 19 says amendment in the certificate of registration. It says okay. Now this rule 19 says wherever there is a change in the particulars which you have filled at the time of seeking registration, and because of those change in particulars, if those change particulars have not been updated within 15 days, then you are violating provisions of rule 19 and then there can be general penalty under section 125. That's one of the points which audit team raises. So what they say is that you see जब आपने registration लिया था तब एक टेबल 18 और टेबल 19 था. टेबल 18 और टेबल 19 में लिखा है कि टॉप 5 गुड्स और टॉप 5 सर्विसेज जो आपने सप्लाई करी है HSN वाइज उसका डिटेल आपके आरसी की जो एप्लीकेशन है उसमें होना चाहिए. द पॉइंट इज मे बी पिछले साल में आपके क्लाइंट का कॉम्पोजिशन आउटवर्ड सप्लाईज का चेंज हो गया होगा. GST एक्ट में देयर इज नो रिक्वायरमेंट टू प्री-इंटीमेट और एड ऑल दीज डिटेल्स इन योर आरसी, but there is a requirement wherever there is a change in any of the details you put that in your RC or put that in the application of amendment. And hence in all those cases where on the look at the books of account he realizes कि आपका HSN का कॉम्पोजिशन ही चेंज हो गया और जो HSN में आप सप्लाई कर रहे हो वो आपके टॉप 5 में तो आता है पर आपके आरसी में नहीं था. He would go ahead and issue a notice for penalty under section 125 or 25,000 rupees in CGST and 25,000 rupees in SGST. Unnecessary you are slapped with a notice of 50,000 rupees for a very small thing which you can take care of. So that is one aspect which is generally seen by them. Second is credit note, debit note. I'm sure all of us know what are debit note, credit note. In case of credit note, audit team raises a very interesting point. They say आपने as a supplier credit note issue करा, सेक्शन 34 ये कहता है कि आप अपना आउटवर्ड लायबिलिटी तभी कम कर सकते हो जब बायर ने इसका जब आपने इसका टैक्स का इंसिडेंस पास ऑन नहीं करा हो. अभी आपने इसका इंसिडेंस पास ऑन नहीं करा, उसका हमें प्रूफ चाहिए. नाउ द प्रॉब्लम इज ये इंसिडेंस पास ऑन नहीं हुआ. This was possible to justify when we had GSTR 1, 2 and 3. Today we reverse our outward liability in GSTR 3B. We don't know whether recipient has reversed the input tax credit or not. Incidence of tax does not only mean reversal of ITC. Incidence of tax means basically that I have refunded the amount of tax to the buyer. How am I going to justify that? Better way is to take a certificate from the buyer. And now in all the audits, at least in Rajasthan and other places, what I have seen, they are saying, आपने जितने भी क्रेडिट नोट इशू करे उसका सर्टिफिकेट लेके आइए आपके कस्टमर से कि उसने अपना आईटीसी रिवर्स कर दिया. अगर आपके पास सर्टिफिकेट नहीं है, we will say it is non-compliance of 34 and we are not going to give you benefit of credit note. Now it is a very small thing. You can take care of this. Whether this is legally right, wrong, that's a separate matter of legal argument. But maybe at the time of preparing for your audit, जब आप अपने year end की books of account close करते हैं, there is no harm taking a certificate like this from a customer. Make it part of a record so that whenever audit comes, they take care of it. Similarly, reverse charge, I'm sure all of us know 31(3)(f) के अंदर आपको reverse charge का invoice बनाने की जरूरत है. The only thing to be taken care of is हर केस में बनाने की जरूरत नहीं है. तो जनरली हम बात करते हैं रिवर्स चार्ज का टैक्स से, आई हैव टू प्रिपेयर अ परचेज इनवॉइस जहां पे मुझे रिवर्स चार्ज का खुद का इनवॉइस बना के क्रेडिट लेना है. बट जहां मेरा सप्लायर रजिस्टर्ड है वहां मुझे इनवॉइस बनाने की जरूरत नहीं है. आई हैव टू इंश्योर कि मेरे सप्लायर ने अपना इनवॉइस प्रॉपर बनाया है और उसको जीएसटीआर 1 के अंदर करेक्ट दिखाया है. So that is why it becomes very important that I also look at it that from the perspective of all those supplies on which I am paying tax under reverse charge, my supplier is registered. Then in those cases, I don't make a reverse charge invoice, but basically my supplier is preparing a proper invoice. Otherwise, department will say you have taken credit on a wrong document under Rule 36 and we are going to disallow your credit. And last thing in general in respect of this, which I see is ITC. What they say is everything is proper. You have record, आपने GRN maintain करा है, ITC register है, सब चीजें. एक चीज है which I want to see. What is that? So they say when you go to Rule 56, read with Section 35, एक record है जो आपको maintain करने की जरूरत है. That is quantitative detail of raw material or services used in manufacture of goods or supply of services. And they say हमें ये चीज का requirement चाहिए कि आपने जो माल बनाया है उसके अगेंस्ट में क्वांटिटेटिवली कौन कौन से गुड्स और सर्विसेज को कंज्यूम करा है. नाउ प्रैक्टिकली आई माइट हैव अ कंजम्पशन रजिस्टर, बट वेदर माय कंजम्पशन रजिस्टर इज पेंटिंग अ पिक्चर very clearly by saying that what is the goods which have been manufactured. If it is not giving me that picture, there is a problem. The problem is officer, again audit officer, he has a power under Section 35 to say that I was not able to get proper records, hence I am rejecting it, and I am assuming all those goods which are not properly part of the records, they have been supplied without invoice, and I want to raise a para in this regard. Again, it can be a vague para, but unnecessarily this para leads to litigation. That is why whenever you are getting a books audited, it is important that this aspect of quantitative detail of goods consumed, क्योंकि आज तक हमें कभी जरूरत नहीं पड़ी जीएसटी में कंजम्पशन को आईटीसी के साथ लिंक करने की, बट रिकॉर्ड्स के हिसाब से दैट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एंड दैट नीड्स टू बी टेकन केयर ऑफ. Last point in terms of limitation, that's the last point. I have the assessment is done, the audit is done. Now department wants to issue a show cause notice. My job is not into go into details of what is there in the show cause notice. My job is restricted only what can department do when they're issuing a show cause notice. Now, before we go to show cause notice, first thing to understand is that department basically it's an adjudication procedure which any proper officer is doing whenever he is issuing a show cause notice under 73-74. What do we mean by adjudication? Basically, we say it's a quasi judicial function. What is quasi judicial function? कि एक एग्जीक्यूटिव बॉडी है या फिर एक एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव ऑफिसर है, वो सारे वो काम कर रहे हैं जो एक कोर्ट प्रोसीडिंग के अंदर होते हैं. और कोर्ट प्रोसीडिंग में क्या होता है? तो कोर्ट प्रोसीडिंग के अंदर देयर इज बेसिकली अ पर्सन हु हियर्स द डिस्प्यूट, ही लुक्स एट द एविडेंसेस एंड देन ही पासेस एन ऑर्डर. So what we are saying is that all these ACs, DCs, additional commissioner, joint commissioner appeal, additional commissioner appeal, all of these people, what are they doing? They are discharging a quasi judicial function where they're looking at my evidences, there is a dispute of tax, and on which they're going to pass an order. Then we have a Supreme Court judgment in case of National Tobacco, which says wherever there are quasi-judicial function, natural justice is inbuilt in it. Meaning thereby, there cannot be a case where officer will say, मैं आपको opportunity hearing की नहीं दूंगा, मैं order मेरे हिसाब से pass करूंगा. I am not bound by the provision of the law. That will be violation of natural justice. And कोई कानून में natural justice के बारे में लिखने की जरूरत नहीं है. Because it becomes a quasi-judicial function, natural justice is inbuilt in this regard. Okay. Now in this background when you look at 73-74 जिसमें शो कॉज नोटिस इशू होता है रिकवरी के लिए, जहां पे डिपार्टमेंट का एलिगेशन है कि आपने टैक्स नहीं जमा कराया या कम जमा कराया, या हमने आपको रिफंड गलती से दे दिया टैक्स का, या आपने गलत रिफंड क्लेम कर लिया, या आपने क्रेडिट गलत अवेल करा या क्रेडिट गलत यूटिलाइज करा. इन ऑल दीज केसेस वी वांट टू इशू अ नोटिस बाय सेइंग आपसे रिकवरी क्यों नहीं करी जाए, एंड देन वी विल फॉलो अ प्रोसीजर, identify whether that recovery needs to be done or not. If it needs to be done, we will say demand is confirmed. If that needs to be done, need not be done, we will say the proceedings are dropped. So that's the whole premise of 73-74. The difference in 73-74, I'm sure all of us know, is जहां पर ये जो पांचों चीजें हैं, नॉट पेड, शॉर्ट पेड, अर्नेस्टली रिफंडेड, क्रेडिट रॉन्गली अवेल्ड और रॉन्गली यूटिलाइज्ड, जहां पर एलिगेशन है कि ये सब अपनी जानबूझ के करा सरकार को टैक्स इवेजन के लिए और सरकार का रेवेन्यू गार्नर करने के लिए. सो वेयर यू हैड इंटेंशन ऑफ दीज थ्री थिंग्स, फ्रॉड, विलफुल मिसस्टेटमेंट एंड सप्रेशन ऑफ फैक्ट्स टू इवेड टैक्स. एंड इंटरेस्टिंगली दिस इवेजन ऑफ टैक्स, दिस वर्ड, इट इज लिंक्ड विद विलफुल मिसस्टेटमेंट और सप्रेशन ऑफ फैक्ट्स. अगर ये दो चीजें, ये तीन चीजें हैं साथ में, तो 74 में नोटिस होगा और प्रोसीडिंग 74 में होगी, अदरवाइज प्रोसीडिंग 73 में होगी. नाउ हम सब जानते हैं 99% केसेस के अंदर ऑल दीज प्रोसीडिंग्स अंडर 74, हार्डली यू विल फाइंड सम केसेस वेयर प्रोसीडिंग विल बी अंडर 73. एंड ये सब ऑफिसर प्रिज्यूम करके चलते हैं कि टैक्स चोरी का इंटेंशन तो होगा ही होगा. बिकॉज ऑफ दैट प्रिजम्पशन ऑल नोटिसेस आर 74. And when you look at 74 says tax interest of 15% penalty पे करो नोटिस से पहले और फ्री हो जाओ. That is why जब भी हम कहते हैं अच्छा सर मैटर को सेटल करते हैं, मुझे लफड़े में नहीं पड़ना, I don't want to contest, he will say 15% पेनल्टी जमा वर्क कराओ. और हमको लगता है 15% पेनल्टी डिस्प्यूट सेटल करने के लिए, ये डिस्प्यूट सेटल करने के लिए नहीं है, ये इस चीज पे अग्री करने के लिए कि हाँ मैंने जानबूझ के चोरी करी थी टैक्स की, पर मैं लड़ना नहीं चाहता आगे, इसलिए मैं 15% जमा करा. That is why that 15% whenever officer is saying that pay and get free, you're not getting free, you are basically getting free for not paying further amount, but you have accepted that yes, you did a mistake and that was an intentional mistake. It is not only that, the bigger point is, which is to understand, अगर नोटिस 73 का है या ऑर्डर 73 का है, उसका सबसे बड़ा बेनिफिट ये है, ये टैक्स का बर्डन मैं आगे पास ऑन कर सकता हूं. मतलब लेट्स से आई हैड टू पे टैक्स, आई डिड नॉट पे टैक्स, डिमांड इज कंफर्म्ड इन 73. व्हाट आई कैन डू इज आई कैन इशू अ नोटिस एंड माय रिसिपिएंट कैन, आई कैन इशू अ इनवॉइस और अ डेबिट नोट एंड माय रिसिपिएंट कैन टेक द क्रेडिट. And it is possible. In fact, now debit note provisions have been changed. I can take credit of debit note in the year in which it has been issued, and there is no time limit for issuing a debit note. मतलब अगर कोई 17-18 की डिमांड आज मेरे अगेंस्ट कंफर्म हो रही है और वो सेक्शन 73 में कंफर्म हो रही है, I can tell my recipient, so I am issuing a debit note, you pay the amount of tax to me, you take the credit, I pay to the government. मेरे ऊपर जो बर्डन है वो सिर्फ इंटरेस्ट का बर्डन है. बट यही प्रोसीडिंग अगर 74 की है, देन माय रिसिपिएंट कैन नॉट टेक द क्रेडिट. उसको सेक्शन 17(5) के अंदर ब्लॉक कर रखा है. सो दैट इज व्हाई एज अ प्रोफेशनल आवर एंडेवर शुड ऑलवेज बी that even if a demand is confirmed, it is an okay demand, we should try and make it a case of 73 rather than 74. And when we look at 73 and 74, the important point is that they use words called suppression and misstatement. And in 74, in explanation, they have given meaning of suppression. Is suppression hota kya hai? Now you read the meaning of it, you will realize that it tries to cover everything. It says suppression shall mean non-declaration of facts or information which a taxable person is required to declare in the return, statement, report, or any other document furnished under this act or rules made thereunder, or failure to furnish any information on being asked for in writing by the proper officer. Means I have not given any information in my return, I have not given any information which proper officer asked from me, that is suppression. But the question is, क्या 74 में सारे suppression के cases covered है या willful suppression के cases covered है? And answer to that, from the precedence of excise, service tax, customs, the answer would be only willful suppression. तो कोई चीज मेरे से छूट गई रिटर्न में डालने से, मैंने रिटर्न में नहीं डाला, और अगर मैं ये प्रूव कर सकता हूं कि वो जानबूझ के नहीं था, it may be a case of suppression, it will not be a willful suppression. Once it is not a willful suppression, it will not be a case of 74, it will be a case of 73. And that is why misstatement also, मैंने कोई इंफॉर्मेशन गलत डाल दी, वो गलत जानबूझ के डाली या जो मैंने गलत डाली मैंने गलती से डाली, इट इज अ मैटर ऑफ फैक्ट. If I can prove this on fact and I can establish this, then all the matters of 74 they automatically convert into matters of 73. अभी हम मेरिट पे बात नहीं कर रहे कि टैक्स लगेगा या नहीं लगेगा, हम कह रहे हैं वो चीज कुछ और है, probably that is a topic not for me. बट हम ये बात कर रहे हैं कि टैक्स अगर लग भी रहा है तो जानबूझ के चोरी का लग रहा है या गलती का लग रहा है. एंड द एंडेवर इज कि हम सब चीजों को 74 से 73 में लेके आ सकते हैं. You realize there are a lot of Supreme Court judgments which talk about this, and they say that it is a question of fact which should be established by a positive act. मतलब कोई चीज मैंने जानबूझ के छुपाई या गलत बताई, इट इज अ क्वेश्चन ऑफ फैक्ट और उसपे एक पॉजिटिव एक्ट होना चाहिए कि मैंने जानबूझ के करा. तो रिटर्न मुझसे गलत फाइल हो गई और मैं ये प्रूव कर सकता हूं इट वाज आउट ऑफ मे बी ignorance, out of not understanding the provisions, out of complexity of the return because of which I could not do it. All these cases prove that it was not an intentional error which I had done, or it was not an intentional act. You look at this judgment of Cosmic Dye Chemical, Supreme Court, very interesting judgment where they have pointed out very clearly that misstatement and suppression being qualified immediately by preceding words willful, it is therefore not correct to say that there can be suppression or misstatement of fact which is not willful and yet constitute a permissible ground for provision or proviso. मतलब limitation period. Meaning thereby कोई चीज मैंने नहीं बताई, अगर वो जानबूझ के नहीं बताई तो लॉन्गर पीरियड है. कोई चीज मैंने गलत बताई और जानबूझ के मैंने गलत बताई तो लॉन्गर पीरियड है इन दैट रिगार्ड. अब लाइक दिस कॉन्टिनेंटल फाउंडेशन जजमेंट इट सेज जब कोई फैक्ट डिपार्टमेंट को ऑलरेडी पता है पर वो फैक्ट अगर मैंने रिटर्न में नहीं बताया या मैंने जो आपको इंफॉर्मेशन दी उसमें नहीं बताया तो डिपार्टमेंट कल को ये नहीं कह सकता कि आपने हमसे बात छुपाई. और इसका बेस्ट इंप्लीमेंटेशन कहाँ है? Whenever you are in doubt, whenever you are doing something of which you are not sure of, and you want some basically validation for this, it is always better to write a letter to the department through a registered post. Write a letter to registered post, nobody is going to look at it, but it is an intimation which has gone from your side. Once the intimation has gone from your side, maybe after 3 years when department wakes up and says, अरे आपने जानबूझ के नहीं बताया, the answer to that would come from, sir चिट्ठी लिखा हुआ था, आपके यहाँ से कोई जवाब नहीं आया चिट्ठी का. 73-74 टाइम लिमिट्स आर डिफरेंट. जहां पे जानबूझ के चोरी का केस नहीं है वहां पे ऑर्डर 3 साल तक पास हो सकता है फ्रॉम द डेट ऑफ एनुअल रिटर्न. जहां पे 74 का केस है वहां पे ऑर्डर पास हो सकता है 5 years फ्रॉम द डेट ऑफ एनुअल रिटर्न. ऑल ऑफ अस नो 74 में जो पेनल्टी है दैट इज 100% इक्विवेलेंट टू अमाउंट ऑफ टैक्स. 73 में जो पेनल्टी है दैट इज 10% इक्विवेलेंट टू अमाउंट ऑफ टैक्स. 73 में नोटिस से पहले आप जमा करा रहे सब नो पेनल्टी. 74 में आप पेनल्टी से पहले जमा करा रहे 15% पेनल्टी. But the purpose right now is not to look at penalties, not to look at कब क्या है, but basically to look at those factors. So last 2 slides and then probably I would come to an end from my side and then take your questions. What can be certain grounds on the basis of it we can challenge the extended period? Why do we call it extended period? We call it extended period because 74 में हमने देखा वो 5 साल तक ऑर्डर पास कर सकते हैं एनुअल रिटर्न की डेट से. 73 के अंदर वो सिर्फ 3 साल तक पास कर सकते हैं. तो ये 3 और 5 के पीरियड को हम एक्सटेंडेड पीरियड कहते हैं. एक्सटेंडेड पीरियड वो तब लगा सकते हैं जब एलिगेशन ये है कि हमने जानबूझ के कोई चीज करी है और हम अगर ये प्रूव कर सकते हैं कि वो एक्सटेंडेड पीरियड एप्लीकेबल नहीं है तो हमारे केस का एक तो हम एडजुडिकेशन के पीरियड को कम कर सकते हैं प्लस हमारी पेनल्टी की जो ग्रेविटी है उसको हम कम कर सकते हैं. So like this judgment of Tamil Nadu Housing Board which says merely non-payment cannot be a reason for invoking extended period. Typical case of गुजरात ओशन फ्रेट जहां पे गुजरात हाईकोर्ट का फेवरेबल ऑर्डर है. कल को डिपार्टमेंट कहता है कि आपने ओशन फ्रेट पे रिवर्स चार्ज में टैक्स पे नहीं करा, हम आपके ऊपर पेनल्टी भी लगाना चाहते हैं. आई वुड से इट हैज बीन मियर नॉन पेमेंट और वो नॉन पेमेंट का रीजन ये था मेरे पास हाईकोर्ट का जजमेंट है मेरे यहाँ का जो कहता है टैक्स नहीं लगता. कल को जाके अगर ये हाईकोर्ट का जजमेंट सुप्रीम कोर्ट रिवर्स भी कर देता है, इवन इन दैट केस डिपार्टमेंट कैन नॉट से कि आपने जानबूझ के टैक्स जमा नहीं कराया. टैक्स नहीं जमा कराया ये फैक्ट है बट उसके पीछे का रीजन था जहां ना बिल्कुल सप्रेशन था ना बिल्कुल मिसस्टेटमेंट था. कोई फिगर मैंने रिटर्न में डिक्लेयर नहीं करा. लेट्स से आई मिस्ड आउट पुटिंग समथिंग इन माय रिटर्न. नॉन टैक्सेबल सप्लाईज हैव नॉट पुट इन माय रिटर्न. एग्जेम्प्टेड सप्लाईज हैव नॉट पुट आउट इन माय रिटर्न्स. Value of taxable supplies have not put out in my return. And department says ये हमको पता चला है that these things have not put, and on the basis of this there is certain reversal of ITC which you were required to do. आपने reversal भी नहीं करा, आपने exempted का detail भी नहीं दे रहा. That means it was a willful suppression and hence that is why I want you to basically pay penalty or notice under 74. Answer to that is when the facts were known to both the parties, meaning thereby मैंने 3B में तो नहीं दिखाया पर मैंने एनुअल रिटर्न में दिखा दिया. अब just because मैंने 3B में नहीं दिखाया, मैं मानता हूँ I did not show, but it was shown in the annual return. I had already intimated to you. You cannot now tell me that I have not shown it properly to you. Decision of higher forum, that also becomes a reason that there cannot be extended period. Retrospective amendment in the law. GSTR 3B is a return, Rule 61. Or this 71AA which is coming in now, the concept of mutuality को negate करने के लिए, or schedule 2 which is only a classification schedule, or tran 1 now the notice can be issued as per rule 117. All these things are retrospective amendment. इस कारण से अगर मेरे ऊपर कोई liability आ रही है, still it cannot be a case for department to say that we will issue a notice under 74. In all these cases notice can be issued only under 73. Then if I have made full disclosure in my return, let's say notice period के ऊपर टैक्स देने की जरूरत थी, ऑडिट ने बोला नोटिस पीरियड पर टैक्स नहीं दिया, उन्होंने शोकॉज बनाया, शोकॉज बना के बोला इसके ऊपर हम पेनल्टी मांगेंगे. आई एम सेइंग मैंने इसको मेरा नॉन टैक्सेबल सप्लाई के अंदर दिखाया था, एंड आई हैव डिस्क्लोज्ड दिस कि आई वांट टू ट्रीट दिस एज नॉन टैक्सेबल सप्लाई. डिपार्टमेंट टुमारो कैनॉट से यू नेवर टोल्ड अस दैट यू हैड अ नोटिस पे रिसीट. I told this to the department. I showed that in my return. I showed that in non-taxable. Now it was for department to see what I am showing in my non-taxable return. It is a subsequent show cause notice. Very important. 17-18 में कोई शो कॉज नोटिस इशू हुआ है कोई इशू पे, 18-19 में सेम इशू पे अगर शो कॉज नोटिस इशू हो रहा है, दे कैन नॉट इशू शो कॉज नोटिस अंडर 74. चाहे पहला नोटिस 74 का वैलिड होगा, दूसरा नोटिस कैन नॉट बी वैलिड अंडर 74. इट विल ऑलवेज बी अंडर 73 बिकॉज डिपार्टमेंट ऑलरेडी न्यू कि एक इशू है जिसके ऊपर आई एम नॉट पेइंग टैक्स. Second last point, the compliance of law was not practically possible. GSTR 2A and 3B, the reconciliation of it, I have not done it. Rule 36(4) valid है नहीं है, कल पुनीत जी के साथ आपने डिस्कस किया होगा. Whenever you are giving an argument, give one more argument. You cannot any which way levy penalty on me for 36(4) because compliance of law is practically impossible. There is no mechanism in the law which has been given which asks me to basically do the compliance. Then we have section 126 subsection 5, very relevant section, and in fact this is one of those things which every professional should know because this is something which has been written but probably we ignore this. It says where a person voluntarily discloses to an officer under this act the circumstances of a breach of the tax law, regulation or procedural requirement prior to the discovery of the breach by the officer under this act, the proper officer may consider this fact as a mitigating factor when quantifying penalty on that person. And it becomes very clear that it says once we have intimated this, proper officer can basically decide the quantum of the penalty. And in fact 126 के basis पे बहुत सारे judgment है, मतलब not on this section but perimeteria sections in the earlier laws which clearly say that you cannot levy penalty in this regard. So these are some things regarding basically in respect of limitation. I would not go into detail. I would only take my last topic for 1 minute. As I said in the starting, that one thing whether serving of notices on the portal is valid. And we see all types of notices, orders, everything on the GST portal. और हम ये मानते हैं कि ये सारी सर्विस वैलिड है, प्रॉपर है, इसमें कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. Everything of this sort is absolutely okay. But we should look at the provision of the law once and see कि कुछ lacuna तो नहीं है government की तरफ से. Now you see there is section 160 subsection 2 and 160 subsection 2 says that wherever the service of a notice or an order or communication has not been challenged at the first brush, at the time of that adjudication or whenever you received it, then at a later forum you cannot challenge it by saying यार वो notice ही गलत था या मुझे proper serve नहीं हुआ and all those things. Meaning that 160 subsection 2 कहता है अगर आपको notice, order या communication की जो service थी वो proper तरीके से नहीं हुई या उसके अंदर कोई भी defect था और आपको पहली बार जब मिला और आपने अगर डिफेक्ट को नहीं बताया तो आप आगे फोरम पर आकर ये नहीं बोल सकते कि डिफेक्ट था और मैं इस डिफेक्ट के बारे में मैं आपको नहीं बता पाया था. नाउ इन दिस बैकग्राउंड इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट टू सी सेक्शन 169. 169 कहता है दैट देयर हैज टू बी सर्विस ऑफ नोटिस इन सर्कमस्टांसेस और वो बताता है कि कोई भी नोटिस या कोई भी ऑर्डर किस किस मोड से किसी भी एसएससी को डिलीवर हो सकता है. 169A कहता है कि आपको आपके बाय हैंड डिलीवरी हो सकती है आपको या आपके एम्प्लॉय को या ऑथराइज्ड रिप्रेजेंटेटिव को. बी कहता है रजिस्टर्ड पोस्ट से हो सकती है. आई एम श्योर ऑल ऑफ अस आर अवेयर अबाउट दिस. हम ए और बी पे बात नहीं करेंगे. सी कहता है थ्रू अ कम्युनिकेशन थ्रू ईमेल जो आपने रजिस्ट्रेशन के टाइम पे दिया था, या फिर डी कहता है मेकिंग अवेलेबल ऑन द कॉमन पोर्टल. सो सी और डी आर इंटरेस्टिंग. तो कहता है वन इज ऑन द ईमेल एंड सेकंड इज ऑन द कॉमन पोर्टल. नाउ रूल 142 बेसिकली जो शोकॉज नोटिस इशू करने के रिस्पेक्ट में है, वो ये कहता है जब नोटिस इशू हो रहा है तो नोटिस 73 में जो इशू होगा उसके साथ एक समरी फॉर्म जाएगा DRC 01 and it will go electronically. So rule 42 emphasizes on the word electronically, meaning thereby notice has to be electronically served DRC 01. So there are two things. There is a show cause notice under 74. Uska ek summary hai DRC 01. DRC 01 has to be electronically. नोटिस के बारे में 142 कुछ नहीं बोलता, बट हम ही मानते हैं कि अगर DRC 01 इलेक्ट्रॉनिक है तो नोटिस भी इलेक्ट्रॉनिकली होगा. इट मे और मे नॉट बी इलेक्ट्रॉनिक, बट DRC 01 हैज टू बी इलेक्ट्रॉनिकली. Now on this issue, what is electronically? A matter went to the Madhya Pradesh High Court. मध्य प्रदेश हाई कोर्ट में एक असेसी गया और उसने बोला कि मुझे DRC 01 जो दिया गया वो मुझे ईमेल पर दिया गया and it was not served on the common portal. तो डिपार्टमेंट सेड अगर ये आपको कॉमन पोर्टल के ऊपर सर्व नहीं हुआ है, in that case it is very easy to say that the compliance of section 169 has not been done. 169 का compliance नहीं हुआ है and hence on the basis of it we can say that the service has not been proper in this regard. Now what is the service on common portal? That is also very interesting. So you look at section 140 section 2 subsection 26. It says that service on the common portal means basically there is common portal which is defined under section 146. Section 146 में उन्होंने common portal को बोला है कि वो common portal which is for a specific purpose, that is registration, payment of tax, furnishing of returns and other things as prescribed under the provisions of the law. Now interestingly, for service of notices for the purpose of assessment, adjudication, appeal, no notification till date has been issued by the government or by board or anybody of that sort to say कि common portal is also notified for the purpose of serving of notices or filing of appeal and all those things. You can see there are 4 notifications, 4/17, 9/18, 69/19. वो सब या तो gst.gov.in की बात करते हैं या ई-वे बिल की बात करते हैं या ई-इनवॉइस की बात करते हैं. And again they are for a very specific purpose. They write what is a specific purpose in this regard. And hence that is why the understanding is all of us should challenge that all the notices, all the orders which are on the GST portal, they are not properly served because the common portal has not been notified for the purpose of this, and hence on the basis of this we can go forward. So with this, I would like to end from my side. Thank you so much for giving me a wonderful opportunity. I'm thankful to the association. If there are any questions, I'll be very happy to take those questions. Thank you so much.
I think there's one question that has come across. This is more of a sort of an information. So in his case, what has happened is the officer has served him a notice 7 to 8 months back. Okay. And from there on, every month on month, he's been asking him a different, paper to be submitted and saying that, we will give you a new format every time. So what is the recourse that he has? That is the question from Mr. Smith.
So I am understanding this notice is for the audit. If it is for the audit, it is very simple. He can issue ADT 01. If you have given the information and the officer is not acting upon it, just write a letter to his senior, maybe an additional commissioner or a commissioner by saying I've already submitted the information, but audit has not been initiated. The manual says that there is a reasonable time basically to get the audit done. And on the basis of that manual, you may write to the commissioner. They would generally take care of it. Basically, lacunas of this part, generally people at the commissioner level, they don't take it happily. And in that regard, maybe they would instruct their lower officers to take care of this.
One more thing, this has been a normal question that every time comes across, that is DRC 3. Now, whether any payment that has been made through DRC 03, whether it is challengeable, whether one can say that, I am aggrieved and still I'm paying through DRC 03. That is one.
So I think Manish bhai, answer to that is one precaution which all of us should take care when you want to challenge that is never pay under 73.5 or 74.5. DRC 3 has an option by saying that you can pay tax under others. Go in others. You have a remarks column there. In fact, you can put your attachment there. You can put all your grievances there, why you don't agree to it, and still you want to pay the tax just for the purpose of getting your interest or meter stop paying under protest. As I said, there is no provision of paying tax under protest, but the purpose of that you're saying is that you are a tax compliant assessee, you're depositing the amount with the government, but you want to contest the matter. And in that cases, the department is duty bound to issue a show cause notice before appropriating that amount. If by any chance the lower officer does not agree to it and let's say he appropriates that amount and issues a DRC 04, it is always better to file a refund claim, get a show cause notice of a refund claim, and keep the matter alive.
There's one question that has come up. I think he's written is which is the appropriate form for making a pre-deposit for filing an appeal.
That can be done through APL 01. Now they have
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think what he meant was that if I want to make an appeal, what would be the right form that I should pay the amount from? Because check post time pe kya hota hai, wo log, they forcefully ask you that you deposit the money and then only we will let you go. So that is probably what his question looks like.
So I don't know in Gujarat what happens in Rajasthan. Unfortunate practices, they give temporary number to each and every assessee who is not registered in Rajasthan, and then they would ask you to pay amount there. Now that order you cannot file appeal on the GST portal. That does not allow you. Only for two orders you can file appeal. One is a rejection or that is demand order. One is a refund order. This 129 order does not fall in those cases. You have to file a manual appeal in that case, APL 01. And I think now officers have become smart. They only do not ask you to pay the amount in cash ledger. They also ask you to file DRC 03 instantly. So that DRC 03 you can use as a pre-deposit.
One more question that comes across is since 1718, the due date was extended to a longer period of time. So the question arises is till what time should one be happy that now the notice is not going to come across with the GST audit?
I think 2025, sir.
2025.
2025.
What if there is one more question? What if officer issues notice on paper while catching truck on road and makes assessee pay the DRC 03? It's the same question. That DRC 03 is becoming an issue these days.
No, but I think the question is are you liable? My understanding is you're not liable. If your appellate officer is very happy saying you have a deposit amount in cash ledger, I treat this as pre-deposit, you can go ahead. If the appeal officer is smart, he will say this is not a pre-deposit, only deposit in cash ledger. At least you pay 10% amount before filing the appeal.
So the amount deposited in the cash ledger has to be offset.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, sir.
So it should be offset in DRC 3 or in APL 1 in case of filing the appeal.
So again, if it is a 129 matter, e-way will matter.
It is an ASEAN show-cause notice under section 73.
And do through APL 01, sir. It will ultimately be set off from a ECL, either of the cash or credit. Don't go through.
Thank you.
There is one more query. In final audit para of report, they are not considering resolved points. The only considered disputed issue. So later on, let's say if another body takes up the any other person takes up the assessment and the issue was already taken care in the previous audit, how do you justify that the issue has already been covered by the other audit team?
Return reply. I think that's where our role comes in. Whatever you think they have raised an issue, always give a return reply to them, get an acknowledgement if possible, or write an email to them. Use them that this matter was already asked and we have replied to it. In fact, give a reply in a manner that you asked this question to us. We are replying to this and this is our understanding.
There's one more thing that generally happens when the risky exporter business was being carried out. At that point of time, the officer would come down there with saying that we are here to search, or we are here, we want this document and we want that document. Logically, there was no need probably to give him that document, but then they create a fuss about it that DRC 0. your GSTR 1 and 3B is not matching, your this is not there, your ITC ledger mein mismatch hai, ye do, wo do. And that's how, the business. So have to tackle those type of issues.
Correct. Now that's a very tricky issue. A lawyer, again, an advocate, you would be challenged that in the High Court. That would be
Agreed.
one way of looking at it. Just go through a High Court and challenge that. A chartered accountant, you would be, so what is the loss which is happening in case you don't give the information? They are saying that they'll give a report at the port, and we will stop your IGST refund. First of all, possibility of that is very minimal. But if it is coming through a DGRM report, then yes, they have to reply to a DGRM report, and that DGRM report actually goes to Delhi, and then on the basis of Delhi, instructions are being issued to the port. Again, to what extent they are legal, not legal, I'm not going to that. So if that refund is on stake, then obviously the answer would be try and give the bare minimum information to which he gets satisfied. Obviously, do not agree to pay any tax. That is one thing which one needs to take care of. But again, if the trade-off for paying tax and the protest is minimum and your refund amount is again higher, again, a practical advice would be pay tax and the protest, ask for a show cause, at least get this thing sorted, and then again file a refund of it if they're not issuing a show cause.
Any more questions?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. M.
Yeah. So one of the funny cases that have been coming out now, DGT have been issuing notice under 7311.
Yeah.
For tax, you have already, for transaction, you have already disclosed, they cannot take recourse to 74. But because now tax has not been paid in 30 days, let us impose penalty at the 73 one at 10% of the tax amount.
Correct, absolutely. And what interestingly, what they're saying is because we have not paid the interest, that is, we are not bound by the circular. But again, the only way available is to that is if they're kind enough to issue a show cause notice, then could contest that show cause notice. If they are not issuing a show cause, going away directly for the recovery proceeding.
This is the only act. This is the only act, sir, where we have seen that without any mens rea, a penalty could have been imposed.
Yeah. Correct. So if it is a show cause is not there, again, answer is go to High Court, depending upon the quantum. Or again, practical advice is if they're recovering it, let them recover it, file a refund, keep the matter alive, get a show cause notice if that amount is not big enough where you don't want to go to High Court.
Yeah. Thank you.
I guess no more questions are there. I will request Mr. Vishal Lakhani from Porbandar. So Vishal Lakhani, if you can unmute. Yeah, Mr. Vishal.
Okay, sir.
Please propose a vote of thanks. And before the vote of thanks, Yashji, we are not being able to, give you due respect by sending the memento. So giving the memento right now, but we'll be sending it in due course of time. And I'm sure it will reach you in 3 or 4 days.
My pleasure, sir. But time with all of you, I think that is more than what that memento would give me happiness. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Obliged.
Yes, Mr. Vishal Lakhani, the convener
Okay.
of the Porbandar City Study Circle.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. It is, hello, sir. It is my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I extend a very heartily vote of thanks to Mr. Yash Dharaji for giving your valuable time and sharing with us your findings and opinions today on topic regarding departmental assessment, audit and limitation period. Again, thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
To the quorum, we will reassemble tomorrow again at the same time. And tomorrow's topic is documentation, drafting of reply and SCN. It is an interesting topic. Hope to see you all tomorrow evening. Good day and good night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
मोनिश मीटिंग एंड कर दे.
I can only leave. The meeting cannot be ended from my end.
ओके ठीक.
YouTube also needs to be.
कर दो.
Yes.